Welcome, dear listeners, to another night of shadows, whispers, and haunted truths. Tonight, we journey deep into a place where history and the paranormal collide. A place of grandeur, memory, and unshakable mystery. The Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal is more than a breathtaking architectural landmark. Behind its majestic Art Deco halls and glittering displays lies a darker layer, a hidden world of restless echoes, ghostly encounters, and stories so chilling they have been whispered through generations. Once a bustling train station, Union Terminal witnessed millions of comings and goings, reunions, farewells, and the untold lives of those who never made their final departure. Its transition into a museum preserved the building's beauty, but some say the spirits of the past refuse to leave. From spectral apparitions that walk the concourses, to disembodied voices echoing through the grand rotunda. The Cincinnati Museum Center holds within its walls a catalog of hauntings as vast as the exhibits it houses. So settle in, turn down the lights, and prepare yourself for a long journey through the corridors of the supernatural. Tonight, we unravel the 25 most haunting tales of the Cincinnati Museum Center. The Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal has long been admired for its sweeping architecture, Art Deco grandeur, and its role as both a gateway and a gathering place. But beneath its polished surfaces, a different kind of story lingers. Among the countless tales whispered by staff and visitors, none is more persistent or unsettling than that of the phantom conductor. Those who have seen him describe a man dressed immaculately in an old-fashioned railway conductor's uniform. His attire crisp and pressed, as if he had just stepped out of the 1930s. His cap sits neatly upon his head, and polished buttons glint faintly, even in the dim light of the museum's lower levels. His presence is so solid, so utterly convincing, that those who cross paths with him often believe he is part of a historical reenactment, or perhaps an actor hired for atmosphere. Yet, within moments of catching their attention, he vanishes into thin air, leaving only questions and a creeping sense of unease. The lower levels of the museum, once busy with the hustle of travelers, boarding, and departing trains, are quieter now. But it is here, in the empty corridors and unused passageways, that the conductor is most often reported. Security guards walking their rounds describe hearing the sharp click of polished shoes against the floor. The sound grows closer, steady and purposeful. Long before the figure appears, when he does, he moves with dignity, his posture straight and his stride confident, as though he is still keeping to a schedule, still ensuring that passengers are cared for and trains depart on time. He is not menacing in appearance. In fact, many say his presence feels courteous, almost professional. Witnesses describe how he will nod politely when they catch his gaze, a gesture that feels simultaneously human and haunting. But it is what happens next that cements his legend. Before anyone can approach, before a word can be exchanged, his figure dissolves into nothingness, as if he has stepped onto a train bound for another realm. Some believe the phantom conductor is tied to the building's heyday as Union Terminal, when the station saw tens of thousands of travelers each day. Conductors were the backbone of the operation, the men who ensured order and reliability amidst the chaos of departures and arrivals. For many, their identity was so bound to their role that even in death, they could not relinquish it. The museum, once a station teeming with voices and footsteps, may still be echoing with their devotion. Others think his spirit may belong to one specific man, a conductor who never left his post. There wasn't verified, but persistent of a conductor who collapsed on duty in the station's early years, his heart failing him as he worked. The legend claims he died while still in uniform, ticket puncher in hand, unwilling to abandon the job that defined him. If true, perhaps it explains why his ghost lingers in the shadows of the building, replaying his duties over and over again, awaiting a train that will never come. The sightings are not isolated. Maintenance crews working late at night have reported catching sight of him out of the corner of their eye. Visitors wandering too far into the basement level have sworn they felt the temperature drop suddenly, followed by the faint gleam of brass buttons in the dark. One custodian told of hearing a faint whistle blow just before the conductor appeared, only for the sound to cut off abruptly as the figure disappeared. There is also the matter of the atmosphere that seems to accompany him. Those who have encountered the phantom conductor often describe a strange stillness that settles in the air, as if time itself pauses for a brief moment. The hum of the building, the distant echoes, even the sound of one's own breathing seems to dull. Then, when the figure vanishes, everything rushes back at once: the footsteps of the living, the ambient noises, and the shiver of realization that they had seen something not of this world. Skeptics argue that the stories can be explained by tricks of the eye, reflections in the polished surfaces, or the imagination of tired staff. After all, the museum is filled with history, and the mind has a way of conjuring what it expects to see. But others are not so quick to dismiss the tales. Paranormal investigators who have explored the museum claim that the lower levels hold unusually strong energy fields, with equipment picking up spikes in electromagnetic activity. Some believe these readings are connected to the phantom conductor, a lingering soul tethered to the routines he once held dear. One particularly chilling account came from a night watchman who claimed that the conductor not only appeared but gestured toward him. The phantom lifted his hand and pointed down a long corridor, as if signaling the way to a departing train. The watchman followed instinctively, only to find the hallway empty and cold. When he turned back, the conductor was gone, leaving him shaken and unsure of what he had just experienced. Stories like this have only fueled the conductor's reputation as one of the most enduring spirits of the Cincinnati Museum Center. He is not violent, nor does he appear to mean harm. Yet his very existence raises unsettling questions. Why does he remain? Is he bound to duty, unable to let go of the schedule he once kept so faithfully? Or does he wait for a final passenger, someone he was meant to guide but never did? Whatever the reason, the phantom conductor has become a part of the lore of Union Terminal. As much a fixture as the exhibits and displays above, visitors may come for history and learning, but some leave with stories of their own tales, of a ghostly figure in a crisp uniform, whose buttons gleam faintly in the shadows of the lower halls. He is courteous, professional, and eternal. He nods politely, acknowledging the living, before fading into the world of the dead. And perhaps, in his endless vigil, he reminds us of the dedication of those who came before. Men who served tirelessly to ensure journeys were made, even if their own has yet to reach its final station. The rotunda of Union Terminal, now home to the Cincinnati Museum Center, has always been a place of wonder. Its vast dome, stretching high above the polished floor, is an architectural marvel. By day, it inspires awe with its grandeur, its murals, and its sweeping sense of history. But when the sun sets and the rotunda empties of visitors, a different kind of presence seems to fill the air. Custodians, security guards, and even a few late-night visitors have reported something strange: whispers that drift across the dome, voices that do not belong to the living. The phenomenon is subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss. A faint murmur, like someone speaking from across the room, though no one is there. The rotunda, famous for its acoustics, has always carried sounds in strange ways. Even the drop of a coin can seem to echo unnaturally beneath the dome. But those who have lingered late at night insist that the whispers are not the product of acoustics. They are distinct, hushed conversations spoken in tongues most modern ears no longer understand. One custodian recounted his experience during a quiet shift long after the museum had closed. He was polishing the floor when he heard what sounded like a conversation between two men just above him. The voices were low but urgent, and though he strained to listen, the words made no sense. Then he realized it wasn't English. Later, after describing the sounds to his grandmother, who grew up in a German-speaking household, she suggested that what he'd heard was an old dialect of German, the kind once spoken by immigrants who had passed through Union Terminal during its busiest days. Other staff have reported similar incidents. Some claim to hear Italian phrases rolling off in visible tongues, while others describe the unmistakable cadence of English from a century ago, clipped, formal, and laced with words no longer common. The voices rise and fall like real conversations, overlapping and weaving together, creating an eerie chorus that seems to hang in the air like smoke. Yet, when anyone moves to follow the sound, it fades instantly, leaving only silence and the hum of the building. The origin of these whispers remains a mystery, but many believe they are echoes of Union Terminal's past. At its peak in the 1940s, the terminal welcomed tens of thousands of passengers a day. It was a hub of migration, travel, and farewells. Families from across the globe, German, Italian, Irish, Polish, passed through its doors. Soldiers departed for war, immigrants sought new beginnings, and countless voices once filled the rotunda. Perhaps the dome has captured fragments of those voices, replaying them long after their owners have gone. Paranormal investigators who have studied the rotunda suggest another possibility. They claim the voices are not echoes at all, but residual hauntings, imprints of emotion and sound, left behind by the millions who once filled the terminal. According to this theory, the rotunda has absorbed the energy of its past, and under the right conditions, usually at night, when the space is quieted, releases them in fleeting bursts. The vast dome, with its peculiar acoustics, may act like a giant amplifier for the spectral murmurs. There are darker accounts as well. Some custodians describe hearing not just whispers but heated arguments, voices raised in anger in languages they cannot comprehend. A few have even reported a sudden chill sweeping through the rotunda as the whispers intensified, as if unseen figures were standing beside them. One guard swore that as he crossed the rotunda late one night, he felt warm breath on his ear and a single word whispered in English: "Leave." Though unnerving, the whispers never linger long. They come in short bursts, lasting only a few seconds at most. But for those who hear them, the experience is unforgettable. The strangeness lies not only in the sound itself, but in the way it seems alive, conversations unfolding in real time, not simply the repetition of old words. Witnesses describe the sensation of eavesdropping on something private, something they were never meant to hear. Some historians speculate that the whispers may reflect the emotional weight of the terminal's past. During World War II, Union Terminal was filled with soldiers and their families. Tearful farewells were exchanged beneath the dome, often in multiple languages, as young men boarded trains bound for the front. Many never returned, and the grief of their loved ones left a deep mark. Could the whispers be remnants of those final words, last goodbyes, echoing endlessly across the rotunda? Visitors who know nothing of the legends sometimes stumble upon the phenomenon themselves. A traveler once described standing in the rotunda during a late-night event. She heard a voice call out behind her in heavily accented English, but when she turned, the hall was empty. Another guest, touring the museum after hours, heard what he believed was a woman humming softly in Italian, though no music was playing. When he looked around, there was no one nearby. What makes the whispers so unsettling is their elusiveness. Unlike footsteps, cold spots, or even apparitions, these sounds carry with them an undeniable human quality. They are voices intimate, expressive, and hauntingly real. They suggest the presence of people just beyond sight, still filling the rotunda as they did decades ago. To this day, staff members often share their own experiences in hushed tones, reluctant to speak too loudly for fear of inviting the whispers closer. Some admit they avoid the rotunda altogether after closing, preferring to stick to the well-lit galleries and offices. Others claim the whispers are harmless, a reminder that the building still belongs partly to the past. Whether echoes residual energy or the voices of spirits who never left, the whispers in the rotunda remain one of Union Terminal's most enduring mysteries. They are a reminder that beneath the beauty of the dome lies something unseen, a chorus of voices that refuses to be silenced, carrying the weight of history in every hushed word. And so, late at night, when the museum grows quiet and the dome towers above like an endless sky, the whispers return. They drift and swirl, speaking in forgotten tongues, fading just as quickly as they come. The living can listen, but they cannot answer. The rotunda remembers, and it speaks in voices not of this time. Voices that roll like smoke across the dome, haunting the silence with the echoes of lives long gone. The Cincinnati Museum Center, once the Grand Union Terminal, is a place where history lingers in every corner. Its vast halls, gleaming murals, and sweeping staircases speak of an era when rail travel was the lifeline of America. Yet for all its grandeur, The building carries with it an air of mystery, whispered about by visitors and staff alike. Among its many ghostly legends, one figure stands apart, a silent woman in a flowing blue dress, who appears on the grand staircase only to vanish before reaching the final step. The sightings of the lady in the blue dress are consistent in their details, and that is what makes her story so haunting. Witnesses describe her as elegant, her long gown shimmering faintly in the dim light, the soft fabric whispering as she glides downward. Her presence is not accompanied by sound or word only, a heavy, aching sadness that seems to radiate from her very being. She does not glance to the side, nor does she acknowledge the living. Her eyes are said to be distant, fixed on something no one else can see, as though she walks between worlds. The first recorded mention of her came from a security guard working the night shift decades ago. He had been doing rounds in the late hours, the museum empty except for himself. As he passed through the rotunda and glanced toward the grand staircase, he froze. There, halfway down, was a woman in a deep blue dress. She appeared out of place, like someone from another century, her attire delicate and flowing. For a moment, he assumed she was a lost visitor who had somehow been locked in. But when he called out to her, she didn't respond. Instead, she continued her descent, slow and graceful, her face pale and downturned. The guard hurried toward her, but before he could reach the base of the stairs, she dissolved into nothingness. The silence that followed was so thick, he later said, it felt as if the building itself was holding its breath. Over the years, many others have seen her. Custodians working after hours, museum employees setting up events, and even tourists have claimed to catch a glimpse of the lady in the blue dress. The stories never vanish, as always. Descending the staircase, always silent, and always gone by the final step. Some witnesses insist they feel an almost physical weight of sorrow when she appears, as if her sadness presses down upon the air. A few have admitted to tearing up without reason, overwhelmed by grief that is not their own. As for who she might be, theories abound. The most widely believed story is that she was once a passenger during Union Terminal's heyday in the 1930s or 40s. According to legend, she had been preparing for a long journey, perhaps to reunite with a loved one or start a new life. But fate intervened. She fell ill within the station itself, collapsing before she could board her train. Some say she died there, her journey never completed. Her spirit, tied to the terminal, is forever caught in the act of descending the stairs, as if still trying to make her way to the platform that would take her onward. Others suggest a different origin. Some believe she was not a traveler, but a young woman who worked at the station, perhaps a clerk or hostess. The blue dress may have been her best attire, worn with pride on the day tragedy struck. The sorrow she carries, they argue, could stem from a sudden, unexpected end-an accident, a heartbreak, or an untimely death within the very walls of the terminal. There are darker interpretations, too. A few paranormal investigators claim her behavior descending the stairs but never completing her journey reflects a spirit trapped in a loop, reliving her final moments over and over. The sadness she radiates is not only her own, but the echo of a life unfinished, a destiny cut short. What makes the lady in the blue dress particularly unsettling is the way she does not interact with her surroundings. Unlike other reported apparitions, who sometimes acknowledge the living or vanish when approached, she seems entirely oblivious to those around her. Witnesses say it is as though they are invisible to her, and she to them, her focus locked on something unreachable. This detachment has led some to believe she is a residual haunting, a mere imprint of the past replaying itself. Yet others argue her palpable aura of sorrow suggests something more intelligent, more aware, than a simple echo. One of the most chilling encounters occurred during a wedding reception held in the museum. As the guests gathered in the rotunda, laughter and music filling the air. A photographer positioned herself near the staircase to capture the grandeur of the evening. Later, while reviewing her shots, she noticed something strange. In one of the photos, framed perfectly by the glow of the chandelier, stood a faint but unmistakable figure, a woman in a blue dress, halfway down the stairs. Her face was blurred, but her form was clear, and she appeared utterly out of place among the celebrating crowd. The bride, upon seeing the photo, gasped. She claimed that years earlier, during a school field trip to the museum, she too had seen the lady in blue. Despite these accounts, no one has ever seen the woman ascend the staircase, nor appear anywhere else in the building. Her presence is tied solely to that grand ascent, her eternal walk frozen in time. Paranormal groups who have investigated the site report strange temperature drops around the staircase, as well as inexplicable feelings of dread and melancholy. Some even claim to have captured faint cries or sighs on their recording equipment, though no words are ever clear. To this day, the lady in the blue dress remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the Cincinnati Museum Center. She is a figure of grace and tragedy, a reminder that not all journeys reach their destination, whether she is a residual echo, a restless spirit, or a symbol of the countless lives that pass through Union Terminal. Her silent descent continues to unsettle and move all who witness it. For those who have seen her, the image lingers long after she fades. The sweep of her gown, the sadness in her posture, the moment when she reaches the last step and simply vanishes, leaving only the weight of sorrow in the air. And so she remains, a spectral traveler of the staircase, forever descending toward a journey she will never take. The Cincinnati Museum Center, once the bustling Union Terminal, carries within its walls the echoes of countless journeys. The great rotunda that now greets museum visitors once welcomed hurried travelers, families bidding farewell, and soldiers bound for war. Though decades have passed since trains thundered beneath its vaulted ceilings, some remnants of that era refuse to leave. Among the most chilling tales, whispered by staff and visitors, is that of the vanishing ticket clerk, ghostly attendant who still lingers behind the counters, eternally waiting to serve passengers who will never come. The story begins near the long row of ticket counters, their glass panes and service windows, reminders of a time when tickets were bought by hand, names scribbled in ledgers, and the ink of stamps smudged fresh on paper. It is here, late at night or during quiet moments, that the figure has been spotted. Witnesses describe him as a man in his 30s or 40s, neatly dressed in the style of the mid-20th century, dark vest, crisp shirt, tie knotted with precision. His hair is combed back, and his expression is solemn yet professional, as though dedicated to his duties even beyond the grave. Staff who have seen him say he moves with purpose. His hands shuffle papers unseen, fingers tapping on the counter, as though counting change or stamping documents. His lips part, forming words, perhaps the familiar questions of his trade. "Where to, sir?" or "How many tickets?" But no sound ever emerges. The silence around him is heavy, broken only by the faint scratch of a pen that doesn't exist or the echo of a memory long gone. Those who approach him closer claim he fades before their eyes, dissolving into air as though he had never been there at all. What makes the vanishing ticket clerk particularly unnerving are the small details that accompany his appearances. Several staff members have reported the faint smell of smoke and ink lingering in the air after he disappears. The smoke, they believe, comes from the station's heyday, when passengers puffed cigars and cigarettes in the waiting halls, and clerks worked amid the haze. The ink, sharp and metallic, recalls the countless tickets stamped and signed, the very lifeblood of the station's purpose. These scents vanish quickly, leaving behind only the unsettling memory of a man out of time. Accounts of the clerk stretch back decades. In the 1970s, when the station was partially abandoned and its future uncertain, urban explorers and security personnel claimed to see the shadow of a man moving behind the counters. One guard, during a late-night patrol, swore he saw a figure lean forward against the glass, as though peering out at him. Startled, the guard stepped closer, but before he could blink, the figure dissolved. The air that night, he later recalled, reeked of old ink, so strong it clung to his clothes. Since the building's restoration and transformation into the museum, the clerk has not departed. Custodians working overnight describe the unnerving sensation of being watched when they pass by the counters. Some refuse to clean in that area alone. Visitors too, particularly during quiet afternoons when foot traffic dwindles, have glanced toward the windows and caught sight of a man in uniform behind the glass, only to realize upon a second look that no one is there. Theories about his identity vary. Some say he was a ticket clerk who worked long hours at Union Terminal, his life so consumed by duty that even death could not release him. Others believe he may have died tragically at his post, perhaps a sudden illness, a heart attack, or an accident. The sorrow of leaving his work unfinished may have bound him to the counters, doomed to repeat the motions of his job forever. There are also whispers of darker origins. A few investigators suggest the clerk may represent not one man, but an imprint of countless workers, a manifestation of all the clerks who once stood behind those windows, stamping, writing, and speaking day after day. His silence, they argue, is symbolic. The station has no more trains, no more tickets to sell, no more destinations to send passengers toward. His gestures are all that remain, hollow echoes of a vanished era. Paranormal teams who have investigated the ticket counter area report strange activity. Temperature drops have been recorded, sudden dips that defy explanation in the climate-controlled museum. Cameras occasionally capture fleeting shapes or distortions near the windows, and audio devices sometimes pick up faint scratching sounds, like a pen moving swiftly across paper. One group even claimed to record the muffled ring of an old cash register, though no such machine exists there now. The vanishing ticket clerk is not considered hostile, but his presence unsettles even the most skeptical. There is something profoundly sad in his apparition. Unlike other spirits reported in the building, figures who walk, whisper, or sing, the clerk is locked in a cycle of work, endlessly miming a job that no longer exists. His fading form at the second glance, his silence, and the lingering smells all speak to a ghost caught between the past and present, forever waiting for passengers who will never arrive. One chilling story comes from a staff member who worked late during an exhibit change. Passing the counters, she glanced toward the glass and froze. There, behind the window, the man stood, his hands moving as though sliding tickets through the slot. His lips shifted, forming words she could not hear. Gathering courage, she whispered, "Can I help you?" For a brief second, she swore his eyes met hers. Then, like smoke, he vanished. The air grew heavy with the scent of ink, and a faint smudge appeared on the inside of the glasses, if touched by fingers long since gone. To this day, the vanishing ticket clerk is one of Union Terminal's most enduring mysteries. He embodies the spirit of a bygone era, when the station pulsed with life and travel. His presence is a reminder that even when the trains no longer run, some part of the station still remembers. Those who see him carry away the image of a man trapped in time, forever waiting behind the glass. Lips moving in silence, fading before anyone can reach him. And when the scent of smoke and ink lingers in the empty halls, staff know the clerk has returned, if only for a moment, to serve passengers who never arrive. The Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal is a monument of history, standing as both a tribute to the golden age of American rail travel and a modern home for science, art, and education. Its vast rotunda once thundered with the sound of locomotives, travelers hurrying to catch trains, and the echoing announcements that guided journeys to every corner of the country. Though the tracks have long since fallen silent, visitors and staff insist that not all the sounds of the past have faded. Among the most chilling reports is the phenomenon known as the train that never comes. The counts begin innocently enough. Visitors describe faint vibrations in the ground as they walk across the terminal floor. At first, it feels like the distant rumble of construction, or perhaps trucks outside the building. But then the vibrations grow stronger, rolling in waves, mimicking the approach of a train on heavy steel rails. Those who experience it often pause, expecting to see a locomotive emerging from the shadows, but nothing appears. Instead, the rumbling fades slowly, replaced by an unnatural stillness. One of the most striking details is the sound of wheels grinding against tracks. Those who hear it describe it as metallic and distinct, impossible to mistake for anything else. It starts faint, then builds, as if a train is pulling into the station, brakes squealing, sparks flying unseen into the air. The echoing shriek is often followed by the deep, mournful call of a whistler, sound so powerful that it rattles the ribcage. Yet when the echoes die, the silence is complete, the great hall standing empty, the tracks long gone. What unnerves witnesses most is not only the sound, but the sensation. Some say they feel the vibrations in their bones, a tremor that shakes through their legs, as though the train is passing directly beneath them. A few even claim the floor itself seems to shift, as if bending under the weight of tons of iron and steel. Others insist they can smell faint traces of coal smoke, or the oily temps of hot machinery, scents that linger for only moments before vanishing into the sterile museum air. The phenomenon has been reported for decades, stretching back even before the Union Terminal was restored. In the 1960s and 70s, when the building had fallen into decline and fewer trains ran through, security guards and maintenance workers described hearing phantom arrivals. One night, a guard on patrol swore he heard a locomotive whistle, so close it made him duck instinctively, expecting to see the train barreling toward him. When nothing appeared, he left his post early and never worked a night shift again. In more recent years, museum staff have also encountered the ghostly train. Custodians working in the quiet hours after closing recount sudden bursts of sound, echoing through the halls, the deep clatter of iron wheels, the grinding of brakes, and the long whistle that seems to fill the rotunda. Sometimes the echoes bounce so convincingly that staff are certain a sound system has been left on. But checks always reveal silence. Guests who have felt the strange vibrations, some even asking employees if freight trains still run nearby. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site argue that these sounds are not simple echoes, but a form of residual haunting moments from the past, replaying themselves like grooves on a record. The energy of countless trains arriving and departing, combined with the emotions of millions of passengers, joyful reunions, tearful farewells, soldiers leaving for war may have imprinted themselves on the very stone and steel of the terminal. What people hear, they suggest, is history itself, repeating the echoes of an era that refuses to fade. Skeptics, however, struggle to explain the physical sensations. Sound is one thing, but the vibrations felt through the ground are harder to dismiss. Some argue that traffic outside the building could cause the tremors, but many visitors note the difference. Trucks and cars rumble irregularly, while the phantom train carries a steady rhythmic beat, the unmistakable cadence of wheels crossing track joints. The detail is too precise, too patterned, to be dismissed as coincidence. For those who believe, the ghost train is more than an echo-it. It's a symbol of the lives and stories bound to Union Terminal. Trains carried soldiers into uncertain futures, families across states, and immigrants toward new beginnings. The terminal was a place of hope, sorrow, anticipation, and farewell. Perhaps the collective weight of those emotions fuels the haunting, ensuring the trains never truly leave. Some stories connected to the phantom train are especially chilling. A museum volunteer once reported hearing the whistle so loudly it seemed to come from directly behind her. Startled, she turned, expecting to see other staff members playing a trick. Instead, she found herself alone in the vast rotunda, the sound still ringing in her ears. Another guest described watching his young son press his ear to the floor, claiming he could hear the wheels coming. Moments later, the boy flinched, saying the ground was shaking too much. No one else nearby had noticed anything unusual. The haunting has taken on a life of its own, drawing both paranormal enthusiasts and curious visitors eager to hear the phantom train for themselves. Some leave disappointed, experiencing nothing but silence. Others walk away shaken, swearing the ground trembled and the air vibrated with a whistle that should not exist. Each new account adds another layer to the legend, deepening the mystery of why the sounds continue. Whether the phenomenon is a true haunting or simply the imagination of sensitive minds, there is no denying its impact. The train that never comes embodies the spirit of Union Terminal, reminding all who visit that the past has never entirely gone. The sounds of iron and steam, the cries of conductors, and the thunder of locomotives may have vanished from daily life. But in the heart of the museum, they still roll through the air, unstoppable and eternal. Those who have heard it leave with the same lingering thought. Somewhere, perhaps just beyond sight, a train is still arriving, pulling into a station that no longer serves it. A train that never comes, yet never leaves, its memory forever bound to the great walls of Union Terminal. The Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal is a place filled with history, wonder, and discovery. Families, school groups, and curious travelers pass through its halls every day, drawn by the exhibits that showcase science, art, and the stories of the past. Yet, amid the laughter of children and the voices of visitors, staff and security guards whisper about a sound far less joyful. They tell of the crying child in the exhibit hall, a phenomenon that has unsettled those who walk the museum as quiet corridors after hours. It often begins late at night, when the building has grown still and the last of the visitors have gone home. Security guards making their rounds describe an eerie hush settling over the halls. The polished floors and carefully lit displays stand in silence. Yet in that silence comes a sound that is unmistakable. The soft, pitiful crying of a child. At first, it can be mistaken for a memory, an echo of the day's visitors. But the crying is not playful or mischievous. It is low and mournful, carrying a weight of sadness that stops listeners in their tracks. The sound often comes from just around the corner, as though a small figure is hidden in the next room. Guards follow the sound, flashlights in hand, expecting to find a lost child. Yet when they turn the corner, the noise vanishes instantly, leaving only the sterile hum of the building's lights. Some guards have tried to track the sound, moving swiftly through the exhibit halls, listening as the sobs drift from one area to another. Each time, the cries remain just out of reach. They echo faintly, bouncing across walls and glass cases, luring listeners deeper into the exhibits. When the sound ceases, the silence feels heavier, pressing down as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. Accounts are remarkably consistent. Witnesses describe the crying as that of a young child, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. The tone is soft, almost muffled, but filled with distress. Some say they hear words mixed with the sobbing, broken calls for mama or papa. Others claim the sound is wordless, nothing more than a steady stream of tears. Always, it seems to come from just out of sight, as if the child is hiding, frightened or lost. The phenomenon is not limited to nighttime hours. A few daytime visitors have reported similar experiences, particularly in quieter galleries. Parents with children sometimes mention hearing a faint cry and instinctively searching for its source, only to discover that no other families are nearby. One couple swore they saw a small figure dart between exhibits, only to find the room empty when they rushed after it. Theories about the origin of the crying child vary widely. Some staff believe the sound is connected to Union Terminal's history as a bustling train station. In its heyday, the terminal was a place of reunions and farewells, with families often separated for long periods. It's possible, they suggest, that the crying represents the spirit of a child who was once lost or left behind in the chaos of the station. Others wonder if the phenomenon could be tied to illness, perhaps a child who fell sick while traveling and never recovered. There are also those who think the child is connected to the museum itself. The exhibits often explore natural history, archaeology, and cultural artifacts, many of which hold their own long and complex pasts. Could the spirit be drawn to these objects, lingering in the halls where fragments of history are preserved? Paranormal investigators who have visited the museum note that the exhibit halls produce unusual audio recordings. EVP's electronic voice phenomena sometimes capture faint sobbing, or the sound of a young voice whispering words too soft to decipher. Skeptics argue that the crying could be explained by natural acoustics. The large, cavernous rooms of the museum can distort and carry sound in strange ways. What seems like a sobbing child may simply be pipes creaking or the hum of machinery blending in odd patterns. Yet even skeptics admit that the emotional weight of the sound, the way it chills the heart and raises goosebumps, is difficult to explain as mere background noise. For the staff who work in the building late at night, the crying child has become something of an unspoken rule. If you hear it, you do not follow it too far. Many say that chasing the sound leads only to deeper unease, as though the unseen child is playing a game that never ends. Some guards refuse to enter the exhibits alone after dark, preferring to make their rounds in pairs. One particularly unsettling account came from a guard who claimed he not only heard the crying, but also felt a tug on his coat as he searched for the source. When he turned, no one was there. Another staff member reported finding tiny wet footprints on the polished floor near an exhibit case. Though no children had been in the building for hours, the prints faded within minutes, leaving behind no explanation. The crying child in the exhibit hall remains one of the most whispered about hauntings at the Cincinnati Museum Center. Whether it is the spirit of a lost traveler, an echo of the terminal's past, or something bound to the museum's artifacts, the sound lingers in memory long after it fades from the air. Those who hear it often leave with a heavy heart, haunted not just by fear but by sorrow, a deep empathy for a child's grief that has stretched beyond time itself. Perhaps that is the most chilling part of all. The museum is a place of learning and preservation, a space where history is meant to be remembered and honored. Yet among its carefully curated displays drifts a reminder that not all of history is peaceful or joyful. Somewhere in the stillness, a child's sorrow remains trapped, echoing endlessly through the halls, calling out for comfort that never comes. The Cincinnati Museum Center at Union Terminal is a place where history lives on through its exhibits and architecture, but the building itself seems to harbor more than just the past. Its massive Art Deco design and sprawling halls have witnessed decades of bustling crowds, wartime soldiers, and travelers setting off on life-changing journeys. Of all the architectural features within the terminal, none stands more prominent than the enormous clock, suspended in the Great Hall. It commands attention from every angle, marking the passage of time with unyielding presence. Yet, beneath this clock, visitors and staff whisper about something far more unsettling than its size or beauty. They speak of a figure, an unnerving shadow that emerges at night, tall and motionless, standing just below the great timepiece. Those who have seen it often describe the same chilling detail. The figure is impossibly thin, elongated as though stretched unnaturally by the glow of the clock above. Unlike normal shadows that flicker or bend with movement, this one is unnervingly still. It does not sway with the light, nor does it bend as footsteps approach. Instead, it looms, silent and unyielding, a black silhouette against the glowing backdrop of the terminal's centerpiece. Witnesses say the shadow often appears when the building is quiet, long after the visitors have gone home and the museum's exhibits stand still in darkness. Custodians making late-night rounds are often the first to report it. They enter the vast rotunda, their footsteps echoing against the dome, only to pause when their eyes catch something standing below the clock. At first glance, many assume it is another worker or perhaps even a lingering guest. But as their eyes adjust, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The figure is not solid. Its edges are blurred, like smoke pressed into the shape of a man. The most unsettling detail is the figure's stillness. Unlike living beings who shift their weight, breathe, or even subtly move their hands, this shadow remains utterly frozen. It does not look at anyone, nor does it turn away. It simply exists, fixed beneath the clock, until the moment someone acknowledges it. The instant a person focuses fully on it, whether by staring directly or walking toward it, the figure dissolves in silence, vanishing into the air as though it had never been there at all. Accounts of the shadow go back decades, even before the museum occupied the terminal. In the days when Union Terminal still served as a bustling train station, travelers claimed to see a tall, dark figure standing near the clock late at night. Soldiers preparing to depart for World War II spoke of glimpsing the shadow while saying goodbye to loved ones. Families waiting for late trains would sometimes notice the looming figure only for it to melt away the moment they tried to approach. Theories about the shadow vary. Some suggest it is the lingering spirit of a station master, perhaps one who spent countless nights ensuring passengers boarded their trains. Others believe it is tied to the clock itself, a spectral reminder that time is relentless and impartial. More unsettling theories paint the figure not as a former human spirit, but as something older, something drawn to the energy of a place that has seen so much movement, grief, and anticipation. Paranormal investigators who have studied the phenomenon note that electromagnetic readings often spike directly beneath the clock, even when no figure is visible. They report sudden drops in temperature, with air so cold it burns the lungs. Some have captured strange anomalies in photographs blurry, streaks of black resembling a tall form, but none have ever documented the shadow with complete clarity. Staff members who encounter it describe lingering feelings long after the shadow disappears. A heavy weight settles in the chest, as though an unseen pressure presses against the body. Others speak of hearing faint ticking noises, louder than the actual clock, as though dozens of unseen timepieces are counting down all at once. More chilling are the accounts of whisper-soft, indiscernible voices that accompany the figure's presence. The whispers never form full words, but the rhythm is enough to unnerve even the bravest of listeners. Skeptics argue that the shadow could be nothing more than a trick of light. The massive dome of the terminal and its unique lighting can distort shapes, casting exaggerated figures across the walls and floors. Fatigue late at night, coupled with the eerie silence of the empty halls, could heighten the imagination of those who patrol the building. Yet even skeptics admit that the consistency of the reports, the same details, told by different people across decades, makes the story difficult to dismiss entirely. What makes the shadow particularly terrifying is its patience. Unlike many apparitions that flicker briefly or dart across hallways, this figure seems to wait. It stands with purpose, motionless, as though it has all the time in the world. The moment someone dares to acknowledge it, it dissolves, leaving only the massive clock above, ticking steadily onward. This behavior has led some to wonder whether the shadow is watching, perhaps waiting for something or someone. Visitors who hear the story often look up nervously at the clock when passing through the terminal. Even during daylight hours, the grand clock looms with an almost oppressive presence, and many cannot shake the feeling that eyes are upon them from somewhere unseen. At night, when the crowds are gone and silence blankets the museum, the clock's face glows like a pale guardian of time, and the shadow below it lingers in the imagination. The shadow by the clock remains one of the most mysterious legends of the Cincinnati Museum Center. Whether a restless spirit, an echo of history, or something unexplainable rooted in the very fabric of the building, it continues to unsettle those who encounter it. Time passes steadily in Union Terminal, but beneath its great clock, something beyond time itself seems to stand vigil, waiting in silence for the next witness, brave or unfortunate enough to meet its gaze. In the vast concourse of the Cincinnati Museum Center, once the bustling heart of Union Terminal, the air still carries echoes of the past. During its days as a thriving train station, it was a place of constant movement, soldiers departing for war, families gathering to send off loved ones, and travelers carrying hopes and fears in equal measure. Among the countless moments etched into its history, none seem to resonate more deeply than the goodbyes exchanged beneath its towering dome. It is here, in a quiet corner of the concourse, that some visitors claim to witness one of the building's most heartbreaking hauntings, the appearance of a soldier locked in an eternal farewell that time has never allowed him to leave behind. The figure is described with startling clarity. He appears in uniform, the kind worn during the Second World War, his jacket pressed, buttons gleaming faintly, and cap tilted low. His presence is not commanding, as one might expect from a soldier ready for duty, but instead steeped in sorrow. Witnesses say he kneels, head bowed, as though overcome by a weight too heavy to bear. His hand sometimes hovers near his face, as if wiping away a tear, while his shoulders rise and fall in the faint suggestion of grief. The sight is so startlingly human that many approach, intending to comfort him or simply to ask if he needs help. But the moment they near, the figure dissolves into thin air, vanishing like smoke in sunlight. What makes this particular apparition so haunting is not merely the soldier's appearance, but the overwhelming sense of emotion that seems to hang in the air around him. Guests who have stumbled upon the vision often report being struck with an inexplicable sadness. Some say they are moved to tears for reasons they cannot explain. Others describe feeling the heaviness of loss pressing down upon their chest, as though they themselves had just said goodbye to someone they loved. Even after the figure vanishes, the sensation lingers, leaving behind a sorrow that clings to the heart. Historians point out that Union Terminal was one of the most significant departure points for American soldiers during World War II. Trains carrying young men to training camps and battlefronts passed through daily, and the concourse was often crowded with uniforms. Farewells in those years were filled with uncertainty. Families hugged and wept, knowing the world beyond the station doors was a place of danger and sacrifice. For many, Union Terminal was the last place they ever saw their sons, brothers, or husbands alive. It is no wonder, some say, that the weight of those moments left an imprint too strong to fade with time. Paranormal investigators who have explored the site suggest that the soldier's ghost may be the lingering energy of one particular farewell, so filled with grief that it embedded itself into the very fabric of the building. They point to reports of cold spots in that corner of the concourse, sudden drops in temperature that defy explanation. Equipment used to detect electromagnetic fluctuations often spikes near the area, and audio recorders have picked up faint sobbing or whispered voices when no one else is present. The soldier himself has been seen by both staff and visitors alike. One security guard recounted walking his usual rounds late one evening when he noticed a man kneeling in the distance. Assuming it was a guest who had strayed into a restricted area, the guard called out, but received no reply. As he approached, the figure lifted his head slightly, and the guard swore he saw a tear roll down his cheek before the man vanished altogether. Another account comes from a mother visiting with her young son. The boy tugged at her sleeve, pointing toward the corner, insisting that the sad man needed help. The mother, confused, looked and briefly caught sight of the uniformed soldier before he disappeared. There is no way to know the soldier's true identity, but many speculate he represents all the men who departed from Union Terminal during the war. His sorrow could be tied to a farewell with a sweetheart he never returned to, or perhaps to the grief of leaving family behind for a future cut short on foreign soil. Others believe he may have died before even leaving the city, struck by illness or accident. His final moment of farewell forever binding him to the station where he last felt the warmth of love. What sets the soldier's goodbye apart from other hauntings is the humanity it conveys. Unlike menacing apparitions or eerie disembodied voices, this spirit does not frighten. Instead, he evokes empathy, sorrow, and reflection. Those who see him often leave with a new perspective on the weight of history and the sacrifices made by countless individuals whose journeys began within those walls. The apparition becomes less a ghost story and more a poignant reminder of lives interrupted, love severed, and the enduring echoes of grief. Still, the question remains, why does he linger? Some say the soldier is waiting, hoping to one day complete the farewell he could not in life. Others believe he remains because his love, his pain, or his guilt was too powerful to allow him peace. The concourse, with its cavernous ceiling and walls that have absorbed decades of goodbyes, holds him as though unwilling to let him go. And so, night after night, he kneels in silence, mourning in the shadows while the world continues to move on. For those who encounter him, the experience is unforgettable. The soldier's bowed head and vanishing form serve as a bridge between past and present, pulling on the strings of human compassion across time. He is not just a ghost, but a symbol of sacrifice, of loss, and of the goodbyes that defined a generation. In the Cincinnati Museum Center, beneath the grand dome of Union Terminal, the soldier's goodbye continues, a haunting reminder that some farewells are too painful to ever truly end. In the quiet lower hallways of the Cincinnati Museum Center, long after visitors have left and the exhibits stand silent, there are stories of a strange and sorrowful apparition. She is known simply as the woman with the suitcase. Her appearance is striking in its simplicity, yet chilling in its detail. Witnesses describe her as pale, her features drawn tight with worry, and her dress styled in a way that suggests the early to mid-20th century. In one hand, she clutches a small, battered suitcase, the kind used by travelers before modern luggage became common. She does not stride or glide with confidence. Instead, she lingers, hesitates, and moves with the nervous energy of someone searching desperately for someone they cannot find. The woman has been spotted most often in the lower levels of the building, in corridors that once connected passengers to train platforms. These dimly lit spaces, with their echoes and long shadows, still hold the atmosphere of hurried departures and anxious arrivals. Security guards, museum staff, and even guests who wander too far from public areas have all reported catching sight of her. At first, she seems ordinary, almost too real. Her pale hands grip the handle of her suitcase tightly. Her eyes dart around as though she is waiting for a familiar face to appear in the crowd that no longer exists. It is when someone approaches her that the haunting turns chilling. The woman will pause, look directly at the witness, and in a voice soft but trembling, she asks, "Have you seen him?" Before an answer can be given, before a question can be asked in return, she vanishes completely. There is no sound, no trace of footsteps fading away, only the emptiness of the corridor and the lingering chill she leaves behind. Those who have encountered her describe a deep unease that lingers long after the vision fades. Some say her question echoes in their minds for days. Who was she searching for? Who was the man she could not find? Theories abound, each one weaving together the fragments of history tied to Union Terminal. During its time as a major train station, Union Terminal was the site of countless reunions and separations. Families greeted loved ones after long journeys. Soldiers embraced sweethearts before leaving for war. And travelers paused between destinations. The woman with the suitcase may be one of those souls trapped in a moment of desperate searching. Some believe she was waiting for a husband, or who never arrived, perhaps killed in action overseas, or lost in an accident before reaching her. Others suggest she may have been a young woman who had promised to run away with a lover, only to be abandoned, her heartbreak binding her spirit to the station where she last hoped to see him. Staff members working in the museum have told unsettling stories of late-night encounters. One janitor, moving equipment through a service hallway, saw a woman standing at the far end with her suitcase. Thinking she was a lost visitor, he approached to guide her out. She looked up at him, eyes glistening, and asked, "Have you seen him?" The janitor barely had time to shake his head before she disappeared before his eyes. He swore that the spot where she had stood was icy cold, as if the air itself had frozen in place. Visitors, too, have shared experiences. A couple exploring the lower levels during a tour became separated from the group and stumbled into a dim hallway. There, they saw a woman dressed in pale colors, suitcase in hand, scanning the shadows as though expecting someone to emerge. They called out to her, thinking she might be part of the museum staff or a reenactor. She turned, asked the same haunting question, then dissolved into nothingness. The couple described the experience as heartbreaking rather than terrifying, saying they felt a sudden rush of sorrow, so overwhelming it left them shaken for hours. Paranormal investigators who have studied the Cincinnati Museum Center claim that the woman with the suitcase is one of its most emotionally powerful apparitions. Recordings have captured faint voices, sometimes whispers of words that sound like "wait" or "gone." Cold spots are frequently reported in the lower hallways, where she is most often seen. Some investigators have even attempted to answer her question, speaking aloud into the silence. "No, we haven't seen him." In these moments, equipment sometimes registers a spike in energy, as though her spirit reacts to the reply. But the mystery remains unsolved. Who is him? Was she meeting a soldier, a lover, or perhaps even a child who never returned? The lack of answers only deepens the legend, making her one of the most poignant spirits said to haunt the museum. Unlike more menacing presences, she is not associated with malice or fear. Instead, she embodies loss, longing, and the tragedy of a story cut short. Some speculate that her suitcase itself may hold symbolic meaning. To carry a suitcase is to be in transit, never settled, always waiting for the journey to continue. Perhaps her spirit is tied to the eternal act of waiting, forever preparing to leave but never able to take the next step. The small, worn case she clings to could hold everything she owns or nothing at all. A phantom object representing her unfinished passage. Those who have encountered the woman with the suitcase never forget her. They remember the way her voice quivers, the intensity of her eyes, and the sudden absence that follows her vanishing. For some, she is a terrifying reminder of the fragility of life, of how isolated moments of hope can turn to despair. For others, she is a sorrowful figure whose story remains untold. A ghost, not of violence or horror, but of heartbreak and endless waiting. In the stillness of the lower hallways, where echoes of footsteps once mingled with the calls of travelers and the rumble of departing trains, she wanders still. With her suitcase in hand, she searches the shadows, asking her question again and again. Have you seen him? And until the answer she longs for comes, the woman with the suitcase will remain, a restless spirit bound to the Cincinnati Museum Center, forever waiting for someone who will never arrive. Deep beneath the grand halls of the Cincinnati Museum Center, where the exhibits above tell tales of history and discovery, lies a labyrinth of basement storage corridors. It is here, in the dimly lit passageways filled with crates, old display cases, and forgotten artifacts, that the strange phenomenon known as the basement footsteps has unsettled staff and late-night workers for decades. Those who venture into the basement after hours often report a sensation that the space is far from empty. A heavy, deliberate echo fills the concrete halls, the unmistakable sound of boots striking the floor. The pace is measured, a slow, authoritative stride, reminiscent of a guard or a soldier on patrol. At first, the sound seems distant, perhaps a trick of the acoustics or a coworker moving about. But as one ventures deeper, the footsteps grow louder, circling the room, sometimes approaching from multiple directions. What makes the experience particularly unnerving is that when anyone investigates, the source is never found. Staff have opened doors, scanned the storage racks, and called out to whoever might be there. Yet the echoes persist without answer. It is as if an invisible sentinel moves through the basement, bound to its rounds, never resting, never acknowledging the living. Many employees have described the sensation of being followed. A security guard making a late-night check might descend the stairs, and within moments, hear the familiar heavy tread of boots behind him. He quickens his pace, only for the footsteps to mirror his own. Turn a corner, and the sound lingers in the hallway behind him. Some staff report the footsteps, stopping abruptly when they stop, resuming only when they continue moving. The invisible presence seems aware, tracking, maintaining its slow rhythm as though enforcing some unseen order. The phenomenon is not always terrifying in a conventional sense, yet it generates a palpable tension. Workers report a cold chill accompanying the footsteps, a pressure in the air as if the unseen figure occupies the same space. Some have felt an icy draft brush past their necks, a sensation that cannot be explained by the building's ventilation. Others claim to have glimpsed shadows flickering at the edge of their vision, though nothing tangible is ever there when they turn. One longtime custodian shared a story of encountering the footsteps on a particularly quiet night. Moving a series of crates through the dimly lit hall, he heard the echo of heavy boots behind him. Thinking a coworker had arrived, he called out, "Silence!" The boots continued, keeping pace, deliberate and slow. He ran, the sound chasing him, until he reached a staircase leading out of the basement. As he reached the top, the echo vanished. He never stayed late in the basement again. Historians and paranormal enthusiasts have speculated about the origin of the haunting. Some believe the footsteps belong to a former security guard, someone who once patrolled the terminal or storage areas in life, bound in death to continue his rounds. Others suggest the sound may be residual energy, a lingering imprint of activity long past, replaying itself in the quiet of the basement. The pattern of the footsteps, slow and unwavering, suggests a figure accustomed to routine, someone who maintained order in a place that was once bustling with activity. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to the basement repeatedly. Using audio recording equipment, they have captured the unmistakable sound of heavy boots in spaces devoid of human presence. EMF meters sometimes spike as the sound passes, and temperature readings drop sharply in localized pockets along the basement corridors. Video cameras fail to reveal a figure, yet the sound recorded is consistent and unmistakable. Many investigators describe a sense of being observed, a pressure that follows them as they move, reinforcing the reports from museum staff over the years. Even staff who do not believe in ghosts find themselves uneasy. When working alone in the basement, the sound of the footsteps is so distinct, so human in rhythm, that it is difficult to rationalize. It seems almost sentient, a force that enforces order in the quiet darkness, maintaining its rounds even when the building above is silent. The uncertainty, the knowledge that something is moving, unseen, is what leaves workers shaken. The legend of the basement footsteps has grown into a quiet part of museum lore. New employees are warned not to linger in the lower corridors late at night, and even seasoned staff tend to avoid the area after hours unless necessary. Those who have encountered the presence often describe a lingering sense of unease, a feeling that the basement is alive with a consciousness separate from their own. Some have attempted to interact with the footsteps, calling out, leaving objects in the hall, or even pacing to meet the rhythm. Occasionally, the sound seems to respond, shifting pace or pausing briefly, as though aware of the living intruding on its rounds. Yet no physical form has ever appeared. The invisible guard remains unseen, persistent in its patrol, a haunting reminder of the past that refuses to rest. The basement footsteps continue to echo through the Cincinnati Museum Center, an enduring mystery that straddles the line between history and the supernatural. Heavy, deliberate, and unwavering, they remind anyone who ventures into the shadowed lower levels that some presences never leave, some duties are never complete, and some echoes of the past refuse to fade. The basement, with its quiet halls and hidden corridors, remains a place where the living tread carefully, aware that beneath their feet, someone or something is still walking. In the heart of the Cincinnati Museum Center, amid the vast halls of exhibits and historic artifacts, the freight elevator is an unassuming piece of machinery. Yet, to those who work behind the scenes, it has become infamous for the strange and unsettling phenomenon known as the elevator specter. Maintenance staff, custodians, and delivery workers alike report encounters that defy logic and test their courage. It begins subtly, almost innocuously. A worker presses the button to move the elevator between floors, and it hums to life as expected. But then, mid-ascent, the car stops abruptly. No call button has been pressed for this floor, and the emergency brake shows no mechanical failure. When the doors slide open, an icy draft sweeps into the cab, carrying with it the undeniable sensation that the space is occupied by someone else. Many describe a sudden tightening in the chest, a weight that presses on their shoulders, as though unseen eyes are fixed upon them. The chilling part is that the elevator often behaves as if someone is moving it independently. It travels to floors without input, pauses as if allowing an invisible passenger to enter or exit, and occasionally jolts as if meeting resistance. Workers have described gripping the handrails tightly, feeling their knuckles whiten, and noticing the faintest sense of a presence in the corner of the elevator. Shadows seem to flicker along the metal walls, and a subtle, cold breath brushes against their necks. Several maintenance personnel have tried to rationalize the events. They check wiring, inspect the buttons, and examine the mechanical systems, yet every investigation comes up empty. The elevator functions perfectly in terms of its machinery. There is no logical explanation for the stops, the chilling drafts, or the overwhelming sensation of being watched. And yet, those who have experienced it know something is there. One late-night story stands out among the many. A night shift custodian was transporting supplies for a new exhibit. The elevator shuddered to life as he pressed the button for the lower level. Halfway down, the car halted, and the floor indicator lit up for a level he had not selected. The doors opened slowly, revealing an empty hallway bathed in the dim glow of emergency lights. He felt a hand-cold, insistent brush against his shoulder, though no one was present. Heart racing, he pressed the button to close the doors, and the elevator lurched downward on its own, carrying him away from the inexplicable encounter. Repeatedly, Workers describe the sensation of an invisible observer. Some swear they hear faint whispers or indistinct murmurs while inside the cab. Others have reported subtle smells that cannot be explained. Petrichor, as if the elevator has traveled through the dampness of the past, or the faint scent of old tobacco, metallic and sharp, lingering just out of reach. Cameras installed for security purposes sometimes record the elevator's movement, yet show no passenger. The motion is captured, the stops are logged, but the cab remains empty. The phenomenon has drawn the curiosity of paranormal investigators. Some suggest the elevator harbors residual energy from decades of visitors and workers, an imprint of the countless feet that have entered and exited the freight lift. Others speculate that the spirit of a former employee or visitor, someone who may have met their end in the building or worked tirelessly within its walls, is bound to the lift, continuing their duties beyond death. The patterns of the elevator's independent movement seem methodical, almost purposeful, as if a sentient force is using it to navigate the building unseen. The eerie reputation has spread among the staff. New employees are warned to respect the elevator, and many refuse to use it alone after dark. Experienced workers approach it cautiously, pressing buttons and watching the indicator lights with a wary eye. Those who ignore the warnings sometimes report sudden chills, unexplained stops, or the unnerving feeling of being followed even after exiting the cab. There is one particularly unnerving detail that recurs in multiple accounts. The elevator seems to respond to emotional states. Workers who are already anxious or fearful report the most pronounced phenomena: the stops, the drafts, the sense of eyes on their backs. Others claim that if one speaks to the elevator, perhaps jokingly asking the unseen passenger to move along, the car reacts with sudden motion or unexpected stops, almost as if acknowledging their words. Some have even caught glimpses of a fleeting figure, reflections in the polished walls, a shimmer in the corner of an eye, or a shadowy form against the ceiling panels, always gone when directly looked at. Witnesses describe it as human in shape, sometimes appearing like a worker in early 20th century attire, other times more shadow than substance, its presence tangible only through the feelings it invokes: chill, unease, and the undeniable awareness of being watched. The legend of the elevator specter continues to grow. Night shift workers, maintenance crews, and investigators alike tell their tales, each adding a layer to the haunting. The elevator itself, an ordinary conduit for moving supplies, has become a threshold between the living and the unknown. Those who experience it speak in hushed tones, unsure if the presence is a benevolent observer, a restless spirit, or something more inscrutable, lingering just beyond perception. Despite the fear and fascination, life at the museum goes on. Exhibits are maintained, artifacts preserved, and the freight elevator continues its silent patrol of the building. But anyone who enters the cab after hours does so with caution, aware that the elevator may not be empty, that a passenger of another time or plane may be riding silently beside them, watching, waiting, and perhaps simply continuing a journey that never ends. In the Cincinnati Museum Center, amid history and discovery, the freight elevator carries more than just supplies. It carries the memory of those who came before, their footsteps imprinted on the machinery and in the air, leaving a spectral presence that persists into the present. And for those who feel it, hear it, or sense it, the elevator is never truly empty. In the quiet corners of the Cincinnati Museum Center, where polished floors reflect the soft glow of overhead lights and history whispers from every exhibit, an unusual phenomenon has long been noted: the sudden, unmistakable aroma of pipe tobacco. For some, it is a faint hint, barely perceptible. For others, it is rich and pungent, filling entire hallways with the scent of smoldering leaves. What makes it extraordinary is that these occurrences take place in spaces where smoking has been prohibited for decades, long before the modern museum rules came into effect. Staff and visitors alike are left baffled, unnerved, and, for those attuned to the supernatural, convinced that the museum carries more than just history. It carries spirits of the past. The scent seems to appear without warning. A custodian might be arranging display cases in the early morning, the building still hushed and empty. A sudden waft of pipe smoke drifts through the air, curling around their head, as if someone nearby has just puffed on a briar. Startled, they look around, expecting to see a fellow worker or visitor. Yet the halls remain deserted. By the time they step forward to investigate, the smell fades, leaving only the faint memory of warmth, earthiness, and smoke on the air. Several employees have reported similar experiences, often near areas once used as lounges or waiting rooms, where men and women of an earlier era would have relaxed, socialized, and enjoyed a smoke before traveling on trains or attending events. The tobacco scent seems drawn to these historical touchpoints, concentrating near old wood paneling, beneath staircases, and in corners of hallways long since repurposed. For those who encounter it, the effect is disarming. The smell is vivid, almost tangible, yet utterly impossible to trace. Witnesses describe the aroma with striking consistency. It is not the acrid scent of modern cigarette smoke, nor the faint odor of incense or dust. It carries the sweetness of cured tobacco leaves, combined with the soft smokiness of a slowly burning pipe. Some say it is accompanied by the faint metallic temps of ashes, a reminder of lives once lived and rituals once commonplace in a bygone era. Those sensitive to sensory impressions report that the smell can evoke memories and images. A well-dressed gentleman tipping his hat, a woman seated with a novel, the soft murmur of conversation just beyond hearing. The phenomenon has puzzled staff and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Mechanical explanations, such as heating systems or air currents carrying odors from outside, are often considered, but consistently fail to account for the specificity and location of the occurrences. The scent appears precisely where historical activity is known to have taken place, often in areas close to the public for decades. No trace of tobacco products or ash has ever been found, yet the olfactory impression remains, distinct and undeniable. Many who have experienced the scent of tobacco report a strong emotional response. Some feel comforted, imagining the echoes of the past, enjoying one last quiet moment. Others find it unsettling, as if unseen presences are observing their movements, silently acknowledging their intrusion into spaces once private. Several staff members claim the aroma appears most strongly when they are alone, heightening the sense that the museum's invisible occupants are aware of them, or perhaps lingering in nostalgic routine, unbothered by the passage of time. Paranormal investigators who have explored the museum often cite this phenomenon as evidence of residual energy. According to these experts, certain events and habits repetitive, emotionally charged, or routine can leave a kind of imprint on the physical environment. Smoking, particularly in communal or social spaces, would have been a deeply ingrained ritual for visitors of the early 20th century. A moment of calm and reflection amid the hustle of travel and life. The theory posits that the scent of tobacco is a residual echo, a lingering essence of those routines, replaying themselves for anyone attuned enough to perceive them. Some of the museum's night shift workers report additional sensations alongside the smell. A faint warmth, as though a body has just passed, or the brief sensation of being watched while arranging exhibits. Others speak of an almost imperceptible whisper, the soft shuffle of footsteps on hardwood, or the creak of furniture in rooms long sealed. These auditory and tactile experiences are often fleeting, but they accompany the appearance of the tobacco scent, reinforcing the idea that something unseen remains active within the museum. Visitors, too, have occasionally noticed the aroma, particularly during quiet hours or private tours. Tour guides have described pausing mid-story as an inexplicable fragrance envelops their group, creating an immersive moment that is difficult to explain. Some have joked that they can smell history in the building, but the effect is always more visceral than metaphorical. Those who are sensitive to paranormal phenomena often experience goosebumps or a sudden chill, interpreting the presence as the spirit of a traveler or worker lingering to enjoy one last smoke, a final gesture of comfort in an unfamiliar century. The museum itself embraces its history, but few acknowledge this spectral component publicly. Among staff, though, the scent of tobacco has become part of the lore, a reminder that the building is more than bricks and mortar. It is a repository of lives, of routines, of habits that have left an indelible mark on the space. Each waft of smoke is a whisper from the past, an ephemeral invitation to witness the echoes of time. In the end, the fragrance lingers, not as a threat, but as a presence quiet, dignified, and persistent. For those who encounter it, the smell of pipe tobacco in the Cincinnati Museum Center is a reminder that some elements of the past refuse to fade. They remain, drifting through empty hallways and locked rooms, connecting the living to the spirits of a bygone era, offering a fleeting glimpse of the lives, rituals, and quiet moments that once filled the space. The elevator descends. The hall is empty. Yet in the corner, faintly, the scent drifts past, curling and twisting as though in conversation with time itself. Those who pause, who inhale carefully, cannot help but feel that the museum is not truly silent, that its history lives on in ways both subtle and profound, and that somewhere an unseen hand raises a pipe, drawing a gentle plume of smoke across the decades. Late at night, when the sprawling halls of the Cincinnati Museum Center fall into silence and the echoes of the day's footsteps fade into memory, a peculiar sound sometimes drifts through the rotunda. It begins, almost imperceptibly, a faint hum curling along the vaulted ceilings. Delicate and distant, like a breeze carrying a forgotten tune, staff passing through the space after hours often stop in their tracks, ears straining, hearts quickening, as the soft, mournful melody grows just loud enough to demand attention. The voice is unmistakably human, female. Yet there is something ethereal about it, weightless, distant, yet impossibly present. It carries a sense of longing, a resonance that seems to vibrate through the marble floors and the vast domed ceilings. Custodians, who have worked the night shift for decades, describe it as hauntingly beautiful, almost hypnotic, yet deeply unsettling. The singing is old-fashioned, the sort of melody one might imagine floating from a parlor of the early 20th century, delicate and precise, yet tinged with sorrow. Investigators first became aware of the phenomenon years ago, when security cameras and audio monitors began picking up strange anomalies in the otherwise silent rotunda. During routine patrols, staff would hear what seemed like a woman humming or singing softly, only to find the hall empty. Attempts to trace the source checking, storage closets, offices, and even the upper galleries consistently turned up nothing. The recordings, however, told a different story. On sensitive audio equipment, the melody was clear, unmistakable, and at times so vivid that listeners described chills running down their spines. Paranormal teams called it too clear to be imagination, yet no living person was ever present in the rotunda when the sounds were captured. Visitors occasionally report hearing the singing as well, particularly during late evening tours or special after-hours events. Some pause mid-step, glancing around the empty rotunda, captivated by the delicate melody. The notes seem to linger in the air, curling around columns, rising to the domed ceiling, then drifting down again, as though carried by some invisible current. Witnesses often describe a sudden drop in temperature as the singing begins, a chill that settles over the shoulders and spreads through the chest. Even the most skeptical cannot deny the effect. The sound is real, tangible, and deeply affecting. Staff have noted patterns in the occurrences. The singing appears most frequently late at night, when the museum is quiet, and the building itself seems to hold its breath. It sometimes emerges near the rotunda's balcony, high above the main floor, as though the unseen singer floats along the upper gallery. On other nights, it can be heard near the grand staircase, the notes drifting upward, fading just before reaching the top. The melody is never the same twice, but there is a consistency in style, a mournful, delicate composition that evokes an era long past. Some theorize that the rotunda itself acts as a conduit, amplifying residual energy left behind by those who once walked the halls. The building, a monument to history and human endeavor, has seen countless events, travelers arriving and departing, celebrations, performances, and the quiet, solitary routines of night staff. Many of these moments carried emotion, anticipation, longing, sorrow that could leave subtle impressions on the environment. In this interpretation, the singing is a residual echo, replaying itself like a recording etched into the very air of the rotunda. Others suggest a more personal presence. Legends among long-term staff speak of a woman, perhaps a visitor or an employee, who had a special connection to the space in its earlier days. She may have sung to soothe the anxieties of travelers, or to lift spirits during the daily bustle. Her devotion to the building, her attachment to its quiet moments, may have anchored her essence to the rotunda. Thus, even decades later, her voice continues to drift through the marble and stone, offering both comfort and an eerie reminder of the passage of time. Paranormal teams who have spent nights recording and analyzing the rotunda agree that the sound defies conventional explanation. Microphones placed throughout the hall pick up the voice clearly, but no physical source is ever detected. Attempts to reproduce the effect using speakers or hidden recordings fail. Some theorists propose that the singing is a form of poltergeist manifestation, a conscious or semi-conscious act by a lingering spirit, deliberately maintaining its presence through sound alone. Others suggest a residual haunting, a playback of emotion and habit preserved within the architectural memory of the space. The singing has inspired awe and fear in equal measure. Staff describe a mixture of fascination and unease, drawn to the melody yet cautious to linger too long in its presence. Visitors, when aware of the phenomenon, often find themselves hushed, speaking in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the ghostly performance. Even those who do not consciously recognize the voice often feel a subtle emotional shift, a sense of melancholy, nostalgia, or the fleeting impression that they are not alone. There are nights when the rotunda is utterly still, silent as a mausoleum. Then, without warning, the song begins soft, mournful, insistent. It curls around columns, dances along the marble floor, and ascends the high ceiling, leaving those who hear it suspended in a state of both wonder and unease. Those present report a sense of timelessness, as though they have glimpsed a moment out of history, a single thread connecting the present to the countless souls who once passed through the hall. The singing echo is more than a ghostly melody. It is a reminder that places hold memories, that spaces frequented by emotion and ritual can preserve echoes long after the people themselves are gone. In the Cincinnati Museum Center, the rotunda becomes not just a room, but a vessel for history's lingering voice, carried in a sound both haunting and beautiful. Those who encounter it are left with the unforgettable impression that the museum is alive in ways unseen, and that somewhere, just beyond perception, a solitary figure continues to sing through the endless night. Late at night, when the grand halls of the Cincinnati Museum Center are emptied of visitors and the echoes of footsteps have faded into memory, a quiet presence has been noticed by staff and late-night security. On one of the long, polished benches lining the museum's main corridor, a solitary figure sometimes appears, a man, hunched forward with his head buried in his hands. At first glance, he seems lost in thought or overcome with sorrow, entirely still, as if absorbed by some invisible weight pressing upon him. The first reports came from custodial staff working late shifts, tidying the polished floors and arranging exhibits for the following day. One night, a janitor paused near the central corridor and noticed a man seated alone, shoulders slumped, his figure outlined by the soft glow of the exit lights. The staff member called out, expecting some explanation, but the figure did not move. When he cautiously stepped closer, the man simply disappeared, leaving behind only a faint, lingering sigh that seemed to reverberate through the empty hall. Since that initial sighting, countless others have reported the same phenomenon. Security guards on night patrol speak in hushed tones about the man on the bench, describing his posture as heavy with grief, his presence almost tangible. Cameras placed along the hallways rarely capture him. If they do, the image is fleeting, a dark silhouette against the marble floor, vanishing in the span of a few frames. Witnesses agree on one detail: the figure never speaks or moves, and he disappears entirely if approached too closely. Those who have glimpsed him describe a sense of unease, mixed with sorrow. There is something profoundly human in the way he sits, as though carrying the weight of an unseen burden. Some staff have claimed that simply being in his presence triggers memories of their own losses, a sudden ache of empathy. It seems to come from nowhere. Psychologists and paranormal investigators alike have noted that this kind of manifestation of figure, visible but untouchable, exuding palpable emotion, is consistent with what are often called residual haunting, where a spirit or energy is tied to a specific location and repeats certain behaviors endlessly. Over time, patterns began to emerge. The man appears most frequently in the late hours of the night, particularly near the museum's quieter wings. On some nights, he is seen shortly after midnight, on others, in the early morning, before the staff begins the day's preparations. Witnesses note that the sigh, which lingers for a moment after his disappearance, carries a weight of sorrow that feels older than the building itself. Some have suggested that the sound is more than air escaping lungs. It is an echo of grief trapped in time, released only when the hall is empty and still. Paranormal investigators who have spent nights observing the corridor report strange environmental anomalies coinciding with the figure's appearances. Thermometers record sudden drops in temperature near the bench, even in the warmth of the air-conditioned hall. EMF detectors often spike inexplicably, as though some unseen energy pulses when the man manifests. These readings vanish just as suddenly as the figure himself, leaving only silence and the lingering impression of someone who was never there. Speculation about the man's identity has run rampant among museum staff. Some suggest he may have been a patron who suffered a tragic fate on the grounds, tied to the museum by unfinished business or grief. Others believe he could be a former employee, a man who cared deeply for the building or its treasures and whose spirit remains in quiet observation. There is no concrete historical record to confirm any particular theory, which only deepens the mystery. Visitors who happen to witness the man during after-hours tours describe a mixture of fear and pity. His presence is not threatening, but it is undeniably unnerving. People often pause, captivated by the stillness of the figure and the weight of his sorrow. Many experience a sense of empathy, as if they are momentarily sharing in whatever grief keeps him bound to the bench. Then, just as they summon the courage to approach, he vanishes entirely, leaving only the soft echo of that low, forlorn sigh. The museum's night staff have adapted their routines to account for him. Many avoid approaching the bench directly, walking wide arcs around it, giving the figure a respectful distance. Others keep cameras running, hoping to capture a lasting image of him, but all efforts produce only fleeting shadows or indistinct shapes. The man, it seems, is content with his isolation, appearing only when the building is quiet, when no one is expecting him, and vanishing when confronted. There have been accounts of objects near the bench shifting inexplicably when he appears. Papers left on nearby tables occasionally flutter as if caught in a sudden breeze, and the faint smell of old leather and worn fabric sometimes accompanies his presence. These subtle details add to the impression that the man is more than a simple apparition. He is a lingering presence, tied to the museum in ways that remain beyond understanding. Paranormal experts suggest that the man on the bench is a form of emotional imprint, a spirit or residual energy that carries a weight of sorrow so profound that it continues to manifest in the physical world. Unlike more aggressive hauntings, he does not harm or threaten. Instead, he is an observer, a silent figure, holding on to his grief while the world passes by. His appearances offer those who witness him a glimpse into a history of emotion, a reminder that buildings can carry memories of the people who walked their halls long ago. The man on the bench remains one of the Cincinnati Museum Center's most intriguing and haunting phenomena. To those who glimpse him in the quiet hours, he is a reminder that sorrow can linger, that grief can etch itself into spaces, and that some presences defy explanation. Visitors and staff alike have come to regard him with a mixture of caution and respect, a silent witness to the museum's long history, appearing without warning, sharing only his quiet despair, and vanishing before curiosity can intrude. Those who leave the bench behind cannot easily shake the memory, the image of the hunched figure, the quiet sigh, the sense of concentrated sorrow. It lingers, imprinted in the mind like a photograph. And somewhere, in the quiet, marble-lined corridors of the museum, He waits, seated patiently on his bench, carrying a burden too heavy for the living, and perhaps too heavy even for the dead. Late at night, long after the last museum goers have left and the echo of footsteps has faded into the vast halls, a peculiar disturbance draws the attention of the night staff. In a quiet corner of the Cincinnati Museum Center, near one of the old utility corridors that winds beneath the building, a single door has become the center of countless eerie reports. Known simply as the locked door, it rattles and shakes as if some unseen force is desperate to escape. The sounds are unmistakably rhythmic banging, reverberating through the narrow hallway, sharp and insistent, demanding attention. The first reports of the phenomenon came from overnight custodial staff. One night, a janitor working the late shift heard a commotion coming from the direction of the small, unmarked utility door. The pounding was loud enough to make her jump, echoing down the otherwise silent corridor. She called out, her voice trembling, but the only response was the relentless thud of the door. Summoning her courage, she tried to push it open, but the heavy metal resisted. Moments later, security arrived, keys in hand, and unlocked the door, to find nothing. The hallway beyond was empty, dark, and silent, with no indication that anyone or anything had been trapped behind it. Since that first experience, security personnel have come to dread making their rounds near the door. They describe it rattling at odd hours, usually between midnight and the early hours of the morning. The banging varies in intensity, sometimes a subtle shudder against the frame, other times a violent thumping that shakes the surrounding walls. Guards report that even when they approach immediately, the noise ceases the moment the door is unlocked or opened, leaving behind only the stillness of an empty hallway. Several theories have emerged to explain the door's strange behavior. Maintenance crews insist the locks and hinges are sound, tested repeatedly and adjusted for decades of wear. There are no drafts, no loose fittings, and no mechanical malfunctions that could account for the rhythmic banging. Paranormal investigators, called in after repeated staff complaints, suggest that the door might be a focal point for residual energy, a kind of echo left behind by past events in the building. One theory traces the activity back to the days when the terminal functioned as a bustling transportation hub. Workers speculate that the door may have led to storage areas or maintenance rooms where employees once toiled long hours in isolation. Perhaps, in life, someone experienced tragedy or suffered while confined in that space, leaving a lingering imprint of desperation that manifests in the door's violent shaking. Staff accounts share common details that make the door's haunting all the more unsettling. Several guards describe feeling a sudden drop in temperature when the door rattles, an icy draft that seems localized to the doorway itself. Some report the hairs on the back of their necks standing on end, accompanied by a creeping sense of being watched, as though unseen eyes are fixed upon anyone who approaches. The sensation is disorienting. The door rattles with increasing urgency, and yet when opened, the empty hallway is unnervingly normal, as though it had been waiting patiently for the intruders to leave. Witnesses claim that the intensity of the rattling is linked to the presence of individuals. When multiple guards are nearby, the door often pounds more violently, almost as if frustrated by their scrutiny. Conversely, when approached cautiously and alone, the noise sometimes diminishes, replaced by a low, almost pleading vibration that resonates in the bones. Some staff even report hearing faint whispers layered beneath the pounding, indistinct murmurs that fade instantly when one tries to focus on them. Over time, a chilling pattern emerged. The door appears to have a schedule of sorts, activating in the same corridor sections and on nights with little activity elsewhere in the building. Custodial teams have noticed the pounding often begins shortly after midnight, as though some unseen presence waits for the world to quiet before expressing its frustration. The door's activity has been recorded on several security cameras, but footage shows only the door moving violently, the hallway empty, and the shadow stretching unnaturally along the walls. There is no figure, no object, nothing to explain the movement captured by both camera and human eye. Investigators who have studied the door suggest that it may be more than a simple, residual haunting. The intensity of the banging, the localized cold, and the palpable sense of presence all indicate what some describe as an intelligent, haunting an entity aware of human observation and seemingly attempting to communicate, or perhaps seeking release. Yet the entity remains bound to the threshold of the door, unable or unwilling to pass beyond its frame. Employees have developed unspoken routines around the locked door. Guards avoid lingering near it, and late-night staff give it a wide berth, moving quickly through the corridor to complete their duties. Maintenance crews have installed motion detectors and sound recorders, hoping to capture evidence, yet the door continues to defy explanation. It rattles when least expected, stopping abruptly when approached, leaving only a lingering sense of unease that lingers long after the noise has ceased. Those who have witnessed the locked door describe the experience as simultaneously terrifying and sorrowful. The banging is not aggressive in the sense of threatening, it is urgent, frustrated, and demanding, like the outcry of someone trapped for eternity. The air seems charged with tension, the vibrations in the metal frame echoing in the chest of anyone nearby. The event leaves a lasting impression, and witnesses often recount feeling watched or followed even after leaving the hallway. Despite repeated investigations, the locked door continues its nightly ritual. No mechanical faults, no hidden occupants, and no logical explanation account for the violent rattling that haunts the corridor. Visitors never see Lee staff, who patrol after hours and, yet its presence is undeniable. The door remains an enigma, a silent, dark portal to a world that seems just beyond comprehension. A place where frustration and despair have taken form, pounding insistently at the boundary of the known and the unseen. The locked door of the Cincinnati Museum Center stands as a chilling reminder that some spirits or energies may linger long after their time, trapped in spaces where history and memory converge. Guards and custodians continue to recount tales of the rattling, of the sudden chills, and the eerie silence that follows. And somewhere beyond the frame, unseen and insistent, something waits pounding, restless, forever locked behind the door that no living hand can fully open. Late at night, when the museum's galleries have fallen silent and the cleaning staff have made their rounds, a strange phenomenon occurs in the women's restroom near the upper concourse. Several employees have reported seeing the figure of a woman in the mirrors, not in the room itself, but only within the reflective surface. She appears dressed in attire reminiscent of the 1930s, a tailored dress, delicate gloves, and a small hat perched carefully atop her head. In the dim, flickering fluorescent lights, she can be seen adjusting her hat or smoothing the lapels of her coat, her movements precise and deliberate, as though preparing for a day long gone. The first documented sighting was by a night custodian. She had just finished mopping the marble floor when she paused to check her reflection in the mirror. For a brief moment, she saw a woman standing behind her in the mirror, hands poised elegantly on her hat. Startled, she spun around, expecting to see someone in the restroom, but found herself utterly alone. When she turned back to the mirror, the figure had vanished. At first, she assumed it was a trick of the lighting or her tired eyes playing tricks, but she would later learn that other staff had experienced the same unsettling vision. Over time, reports of the Lady of the Mirror, as employees have come to call her, became more frequent. Security personnel walking late-night rounds would pause near the restroom only to glimpse the woman in the mirror. She never steps out of the reflection. The room remains empty. The figure seems tied to the mirror itself, appearing only when one is looking indirectly, and disappearing instantly when someone tries to make eye contact. Witnesses describe an almost ethereal quality. She appears slightly blurred at the edges, like an image captured through fog or old glass. And yet her expression is distinctly human, calm, and deliberate. Some speculate that the Lady of the Mirror may be a lingering imprint from the museum's earlier days. Historical records show that the building once hosted a grand hotel in the early 20th century, complete with lavish ballrooms and ornate dressing rooms. It is possible that she was a guest or employee during that era, and her presence has somehow been captured in the reflective surfaces, replaying fragments of her daily life in a space that no longer exists as she knew it. Other employees report a peculiar consistency in her appearances. She tends to appear in the mirror around the same time each night, usually just after midnight. Some staff claim they can hear faint sounds accompanying her presence. The soft rustle of fabric, the subtle tap of heels on tile, though no physical source is ever detected. There are even reports that the temperature near the mirror drops slightly when she manifests, a chill that runs along the spine and makes the hair stand on end. Witnesses have described a strange psychological effect when encountering her. The longer one stares at the mirror, the more pronounced the feeling of being observed becomes. Some describe a sense of connection, as though the lady is aware of their presence and acknowledges it through her silent gestures. Others feel an overwhelming sadness emanating from her reflection, a melancholy as if she is trapped between her time and ours, endlessly performing a simple act that no longer holds meaning. Paranormal investigators have studied the mirror extensively. Cameras and sensors set up in the restroom have captured anomalies, including faint distortions in the glass where she appears and subtle changes in light intensity. Some recordings even show the slight outline of a figure appearing and disappearing, though the room remains empty. Investigators note that the phenomenon does not follow typical explanations for reflections, shadows, or optical illusions. It seems localized entirely to the mirror, and attempts to recreate the effect under similar conditions have failed. Staff have adapted to her presence in their own ways. Some avoid the restroom during the hours when sightings are most common, while others leave small tokens, such as a scarf or a note, on the countertop. Interestingly, these offerings are never disturbed, but witnesses report that the lady occasionally seems to linger longer in the mirror when items are present, almost as if she acknowledges them silently. The effect is subtle, imperceptible to casual observation, but consistently noted by those who frequent the area during the night shift. Visitors and employees alike have described an eerie yet strangely captivating quality about the lady of the mirror. She is not threatening. There is no sense of aggression, only a persistent, haunting presence that seems to exist in a parallel layer of reality. She is a ghost, bound not by walls or floors, but by the reflective surface, repeating gestures that are frozen in time, yet fluid in motion. Her appearance is fleeting, yet the memory lingers long after she vanishes, leaving those who see her with a mix of fascination and unease. Some have attempted to engage her directly, speaking to her as they would a visitor, but she remains silent, acknowledging only with the subtle movements of her hands or the tilt of her head. It is as if the mirror is both a window and a barrier, allowing her to manifest, but keeping her separated from the world outside her reflection. The lady of the mirror continues to intrigue, frighten, and captivate those who work late in the museum. She embodies a fragment of the past made tangible, a silent observer of the present, and a ghostly presence that refuses to leave. Every night, as the building empties and silence falls, her reflection may appear in the mirror, adjusting her hat, straightening her gloves, and reminding those who see her that some echoes of history linger. Watching patiently from just beyond the surface of the glass, late at night, when the grand hallways of the Cincinnati Museum Center fall silent and the last of the custodial staff have finished their rounds, a strange activity begins in the archives. Archivists, who have worked the late shifts, speak in hushed tones about objects moving of their own accord, folders sliding across tables, boxes tipping over, and documents fluttering as though an invisible hand is rifling through them. At first, these occurrences were dismissed as drafts or the settling of the building, but repeated experiences over decades have convinced staff that the archives are home to something far less ordinary. A poltergeist. The activity seems tied to a specific section of the archives, where records from the station's busiest war years are stored. Here, old letters, ledgers, and photographs from the early 20th century lie stacked on shelves, many of them yellowed and brittled with age. Archivists report that when they handle these materials, the air grows suddenly cold, papers shiver even without a breeze, and heavy files shift as if resisting examination. One archivist recounted placing a ledger on a table, only to watch it slide several feet across the surface before landing upright as though guided by a careful hand. Witnesses consistently describe an invisible presence that is neither fully malevolent nor benign. It is disruptive, playful in a terrifying way, and frustratingly elusive. Light taps and knocks echo through the room, originating from no discernible source. At times, boxes fall from shelves despite being properly stacked, sending papers scattering across the floor. The poltergeist seems particularly active during periods of intense archival work, almost as if it resents intrusions into its domain, or perhaps is compelled to interact with objects that connect it to the past. One night, an archivist working alone recounted a particularly chilling encounter. She had been examining letters written by railway workers during World War I, when a sudden gust of wind, impossible given the sealed room, swept across her workspace. Papers lifted into the air, and a small cabinet rattled violently, as though someone were shaking it in frustration. Heart-pounding, she watched as several envelopes slid off the table and stacked themselves neatly on the edge, their corners perfectly aligned. The temperature dropped sharply, and she felt a presence behind her, though no one was there. She described the sensation as an invisible gaze, cold and unwavering, observing her every movement. The poltergeist also exhibits a strange attachment to specific documents. Letters written by soldiers to their families, wartime manifests, and personnel records often seem to trigger the most intense activity. Archivists have reported papers tearing spontaneously, ink smearing across pages, and objects that had been carefully stored becoming dislodged in ways that defy gravity. Paranormal investigators brought in to study the phenomena have noted unexplained electromagnetic fluctuations around these materials, though no definitive explanation has ever been reached. Some believe that the spirit is tied to the intense emotions captured in these historical documents. Letters from soldiers express fear, grief, and longing, and manifest the weight of lives caught in turmoil. The poltergeist may be a restless remnant of these past energies, drawn to the physical traces of human experience left behind. Others theorized it could be an archivist from another time, forever bound to protect, organize, and tend the records of those who once walked the halls of the station. Interestingly, the poltergeist's behavior varies with the level of attention given to the archives. When archivists work quickly and respectfully, the activity tends to be subdued. When documents are mishandled or treated carelessly, objects move more violently, papers scatter, and drawers slam shut without warning. One researcher observed an entire stack of photographs slide to the floor after accidentally brushing them with her sleeve, as if the spirit was correcting an oversight or expressing displeasure. Visitors to the archives rarely witness the phenomena firsthand, as the most intense activity occurs during late-night shifts. However, those who have lingered in the corridors outside describe faint noises, footsteps pacing the stacks, the rustle of paper, and occasional thumps that seem to echo from empty rooms. Some even claim to see shadows flicker across the walls, moving against the direction of any light source. Security cameras occasionally capture anomalies, such as files sliding across tables or lights flickering without electrical cause, though the evidence is subtle and open to interpretation. Despite its disruptive nature, the poltergeist has not caused lasting harm. No staff member has been physically injured, and objects are rarely damaged beyond repair. Yet the psychological impact is profound. Archivists speak of sleepless nights, heightened anxiety when alone in the room, and an uneasy sense of being watched even after leaving the building. There is a pervasive feeling that the archives are alive in a way that transcends the ordinary, and that the poltergeist is the unseen custodian of that living history. Attempts to investigate or communicate with the spirit have met with mixed results. Paranormal teams report that traditional methods, such as EVP sessions, motion detectors, and thermal imaging, reveal fleeting anomalies, but nothing concrete. Some researchers claim to have heard whispers in the quiet hum of the ventilation system, murmurs of names and dates that correspond to the wartime records. Others have felt sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature near specific shelves, as though the past itself were reaching out. Staff have adapted to the poltergeist over the years, Late-night archivists keep small tokens of acknowledgement nearby, a neatly stacked pile of papers, a respectful silence when handling sensitive records, and a cautious reverence for the materials. These gestures seem to lessen the frequency and intensity of disturbances, though they never fully stop. The archives have become a place of constant vigilance, where history is not only preserved but haunted by its own echoes. The poltergeist of the archives remains an enduring mystery. It is tied to the war years, to the emotional weight of historical documents, and to the physical space of the museum's storage rooms. It is disruptive, eerie, and sometimes terrifying, yet also strangely compelling. A reminder that history is never truly silent, and that the past may linger in ways we cannot see, observing and interacting with the present. Those who have spent time in the archives speak of a presence that is patient, watchful, and ever tied to the echoes of human experience, captured in ink and paper. A ghostly custodian that ensures the stories of the past continue to be felt in the present. Late at night, when the bustling halls of the Cincinnati Museum Center fall silent and only the hum of the ventilation system persists, staff members often catch glimpses of a figure patrolling the corridors. Dressed in a dark security uniform, polished shoes clicking against the tiled floors, he moves with an authority and precision that feels familiar yet out of place. At first, new employees assumed he was one of the overnight guards, or perhaps a recent hire, methodically inspecting the museum's wings as part of routine rounds. But as nights passed and schedules were verified, it became clear that no such guard had ever been on the roster. Those who first encountered him describe a tall, imposing figure whose posture is perfect, shoulders squared, and gaze constantly scanning the halls. His presence is commanding yet quiet, as if he has been assigned to the museum for a duty that transcends time itself. Staff walking the halls late into the night have reported feeling a sudden chill when he appears, the temperature dropping noticeably, carrying with it the faint scent of old leather and polished metal. Some describe a strange familiarity in his appearance, the kind that makes one certain they have seen him somewhere before, though they know they haven't. One evening, a maintenance worker named Thomas was repairing a light fixture in the main corridor. The hall was empty, the usual distant echoes of passing visitors absent. As he tightened a bolt, he noticed a shadow gliding down the hallway. When he looked up, he saw the guard, stepping with deliberate precision, moving closer. Thomas called out, thinking it was a new security hire. The man turned his head slightly, not enough to see a face, and continued walking. Confused, Thomas followed him, only to witness the figure vanish into thin air as he reached the end of the corridor. Stories of these encounters are remarkably consistent. The figure never interacts directly with staff, never speaks, and never acknowledges being noticed. Yet the sense of being watched is unmistakable. Those who have spent time in the museum's halls late at night often report a feeling of unease, a sense that every movement is observed, every footstep accounted for. It's as if the guard is not merely patrolling the physical space, but monitoring the flow of energy within the museum, silently ensuring that all is as it should be. Some employees speculate that he is tied to the museum's history, a lingering presence from an earlier era. Records show that the museum has employed many guards over the decades, some of whom were deeply committed to the safety and preservation of the exhibits. Perhaps this spectral guard is one such individual, unable to leave his post even in death. There is an unspoken reverence surrounding him, the way he moves so deliberately, as though fulfilling a duty no living person could, or perhaps no longer dares to. The guard is most commonly seen in areas of the museum that have experienced the most activity over the years. In the rotunda, he paces along the perimeter, pausing at doorways, sometimes stopping to gaze at historical displays. In the hallways leading to storage rooms, his presence is often accompanied by inexplicable drafts, lights flickering without electrical cause, and the faintest sound of keys jingling or boots scraping against stone. While these phenomena have spooked some employees, most have come to accept them as part of the guard's unseen routine, a spectral extension of the museum's living memory. Visitors are rarely aware of him, as he tends to appear only when the museum is empty or nearly so. Yet occasionally, late-night guests have reported seeing a dark figure standing at the end of a hall or silently moving past an exhibit. They describe a sensation of being observed without judgment, a quiet, almost protective awareness. Unlike other apparitions that strike fear, the watchful guard seems bound by duty rather than malice. There is no sudden attack, no cold hand gripping the shoulder. Instead, the experience leaves a lingering sense of unease, coupled with inexplicable reassurance, as though one is being watched over by someone whose authority transcends time. Attempts to document the guard have produced mixed results. Security cameras sometimes capture fleeting shadows, a blur that cannot be attributed to passing staff. Audio recordings occasionally pick up the faint echo of footsteps on polished floors, synchronized with no one present. Paranormal investigators who have visited the museum describe a presence that is patient, deliberate, and highly focused, almost as though it moves with a purpose that cannot be disrupted by human interference. No photograph or video has ever clearly captured the guard, reinforcing the idea that his existence is tethered to the museum in ways beyond physical reality. Some staff members have adopted informal practices to acknowledge his presence. Custodians leave small tokens at the end of corridors, such as neatly stacked cleaning tools or a straightened line of chairs, believing these gestures are recognized by the guard. Archivists and curators handle exhibits with extra care, noting that disturbances or misplacements seem to coincide with his appearances. It's as if the watchful guard is not only observing, but subtly enforcing order, maintaining a quiet discipline within the museum that transcends the living staff's capabilities. Despite the mystery, encounters with the guard have never resulted in harm. His presence is disconcerting, commanding attention and inspiring awe. But he has never directly interfered with anyone's work or caused physical damage. Yet, the psychological impact is profound. Staff report lingering glances toward hallways where they have seen him, a heightened awareness of their movements, and a peculiar comfort that the museum is watched over, even if by a being who exists beyond the boundaries of life and death. The watchful guard of the Cincinnati Museum Center remains an enduring enigma. He embodies a quiet authority, a spectral custodian bound to the halls and exhibits, silently preserving order in a place steeped in history. Whether he is the spirit of a dedicated former employee or a manifestation of the museum's collective memory, his presence reminds all who walk the quiet corridors at night that the past is never truly gone. He moves unseen, yet his gaze is felt, a constant reminder that some duties never end, even beyond the veil of mortality. In the grand main hall of the Cincinnati Museum Center, sunlight streams through towering windows, illuminating polished floors and the intricate architecture that draws visitors from near and far. Among the ornate surroundings, however, there exists one object that stands out, not for its beauty, but for its chilling peculiarity. A simple wooden bench tucked near a column along the wall. At first glance, it seems ordinary, just another place to rest tired feet. But those who approach it quickly realize that something about it is far from ordinary. Even during the sweltering heat of summer, the bench remains inexplicably cold to the touch. Visitors often pause before sitting, noticing the stark contrast between the warmth of the hall and the icy chill that emanates from the wood. The sensation is immediate, sinking deep into their hands and legs, and often accompanied by a creeping unease that is difficult to shake. Many describe it as a coldness that is not merely physical, but emotional, a sense of despair that seems to seep from the bench itself. Those who dare to sit report feeling waves of sorrow wash over them. It starts subtly, a twinge of discomfort in the chest, a hollow emptiness in the stomach, and then, more vividly, the overwhelming sense that someone has experienced immense grief in that very spot. Visitors speak of fleeting visions, flashes of a figure hunched over, head in hands, weeping silently. Others describe hearing the faint murmur of hushed words or a quiet sob carried on the still air of the hall. The intensity of the emotions is disorienting, as if the bench has somehow absorbed the pain of the past and offers it to anyone who sits there. One longtime staff member recalls the first time he felt the bench's strange presence. It was late in the afternoon, the museum nearly empty, and he had stopped to rest. As soon as he sat, a sudden chill ran down his spine. He felt an indescribable heaviness pressing on his shoulders and chest, as though invisible hands were urging him to rise. Shadows seemed to flicker at the edge of his vision, yet whenever he turned, the hall was empty. Heart pounding, he left quickly, noticing the lingering cold clinging to his clothes long after he had stood. From that day on, he would avoid the bench, warning others of its unnerving reputation. Visitors who have braved a seat on the cold bench often recount a shared feeling of witnessing a memory rather than a ghost. Some claim to see a woman, dressed in clothing from another century, receiving devastating news. A letter perhaps, or a telegram. Her shoulders trembling as she struggles to contain her grief. Others sense a man sitting silently, head bowed in despair, clutching an object of deep personal significance. No one sees the same vision, yet everyone experiences the same intense sorrow, as if the bench tailors its emotional imprint to the observer. Interestingly, the bench's chilling effects are localized. Those who stand beside it or pass quickly by feel nothing unusual. The coldness and emotional weight seem to attach only to the act of sitting. Many have described an almost magnetic pull, a subtle compulsion that draws them to rest their weight on the bench, only to regret it moments later. It is as if the bench itself selects its victims, offering them a glimpse into a moment of profound loss that occurred long ago. Paranormal investigators who have studied the bench report temperature readings far below the ambient air, even during peak summer. Electromagnetic sensors spike unpredictably, and audio recordings sometimes capture faint sobs or whispers when the area is otherwise silent. Attempts to move the bench or cover it with cushions have been unsuccessful. No matter what alterations are made, the cold persists, and the sense of grief remains palpable. Some speculate that the bench sits atop a point of residual energy, a lingering emotional imprint left by an unknown tragedy. Others wonder if it is a marker of unresolved sorrow, a conduit through which the past touches the present. Despite its eerie reputation, the cold bench attracts a steady stream of bravor, perhaps curious visitors. Some sit to test the legend, others to meditate or reflect. Many leave with a strange mixture of awe and relief, feeling the weight of another person's sorrow, yet strangely cleansed after the experience. A few speak of subtle guidance, as if the bench offers insight or perspective amid the heaviness, though this is rare and fleeting. For most, the encounter is a chilling reminder that even within a place of learning and history, the echoes of human emotion linger, sometimes waiting in the most unassuming of places. Over the years, the cold bench has developed its own mythos among museum goers and staff alike. It is a place whispered about in tours, a quiet legend that adds a subtle layer of mystery to the Cincinnati Museum Center. People speak of it in hushed tones, exchanging stories of the visions, feelings, and sensations they experienced. Some leave offerings, small tokens of remembrance, or notes tucked discreetly under the bench, hoping to honor whatever soul may have left its sorrow behind. Yet, despite the fascination, the bench remains untouchable in a way that commands respect. It is not violent or overtly malevolent, but its power is undeniable. Sitting there is a risk, an intimate encounter with grief that transcends time, offering a fleeting connection to lives and moments long past. For those who understand, the cold bench is not merely furniture. It is a reminder that history is alive, not just in documents or exhibits, but in the lingering emotions of those who have walked before us. And so, the cold bench endures, silently chilling those who rest upon it, carrying sorrow through decades, a spectral testament to the unseen stories of the Cincinnati Museum Center. To sit there is to confront grief itself, raw, immediate, and impossible to ignore, leaving an impression that lingers far longer than the brief moments spent upon its frozen surface. The grand hall of the Cincinnati Museum Center, with its sweeping arches and iconic clock, is often filled with the quiet hum of visitors during the day. But in the still hours of the night, when the museum is closed and the echo of footsteps fades. Some have reported a phenomenon that defies explanation. The disappearing crowd. Witnesses described the appearance of figures moving toward the platforms, as though caught in the midst of a daily commute long past. They are sharply dressed, their clothing reflecting styles from the early 20th century, with hats perched carefully and coats buttoned neatly. Luggage is carried with precision. Small suitcases, trunks, and satchels. Yet there is a ghostly quality to their movements. The figures glide rather than walk, silent despite the obvious rush, and their faces are often blurred or indistinct, like memories half remembered. Those who have seen the crowd describe a surreal sense of urgency. The figures seem unaware of the present, moving with intent toward an unseen destination. They do not respond to calls or gestures. Even the presence of observers does not slow their pace. Many who witness them describe the scene as both mesmerizing and unnerving, a frozen snapshot of a moment in history that refuses to remain buried. The first reports often come from late-night security guards, custodians, or maintenance workers. One guard recounted a particularly vivid encounter. He had been walking the empty concourse, flashlight in hand, when movement caught his eye. Dozens of figures, as if summoned by some invisible train, were hurrying toward the platforms. He froze, expecting some mechanical trick of shadows or reflections, but the scene unfolded in full three-dimensional clarity. People jostled one another, a faint sense of bustle in the air, yet no sound emerged. No voices, no footsteps, not even the clatter of wheels on the polished floor. The guard tried to step closer, intending to call out, but the crowd did not slow or acknowledge him. In a matter of seconds, almost imperceptibly, the figures began to fade. First their outlines blurred, then details vanished, until nothing remained but the empty hall. Perfectly still, save for the guard's own racing heartbeat. He described the lingering chill in the air and the faint smell of coal smoke, as if the crowd had arrived straight from a long-forgotten steam train. Other witnesses report similar experiences. Custodians sweeping the platforms have seen bustling groups that vanish when approached. Occasionally, a single figure will linger slightly longer, appearing to hesitate at a doorway or adjust a hat before succumbing to the same disappearance. Photographs taken during these sightings sometimes capture faint silhouettes, blurry forms that are difficult to decipher but unmistakably human. Paranormal investigators have also documented irregular temperature drops and sudden electromagnetic spikes coinciding with these events, further suggesting that something inexplicable is at work. The disappearing crowd seems tied to memory itself. Researchers and storytellers speculate that the museum's concourse, once a hub of railroad activity, retains echoes of the thousands of people who pass through it daily. The hall, steeped in decades of human emotion, anticipation, excitement, farewells, and reunions, may act as a conduit, replaying these moments for those attuned to the residual energy. The figures appear ordinary at first glance, but closer observation reveals the anachronisms that hint at their spectral nature. A woman's hat from the 1920s, a soldier's uniform from World War I, a child clutching a small leather suitcase long out of fashion. Interestingly, the crowd does not seem malevolent. There is no sense of threat, only a peculiar dissonance. The presence of life in a place where life should no longer move. Yet the experience can be profoundly unsettling. Witnesses often report lingering feelings of displacement, a sudden awareness of the thin boundary between past and present. Some claim they can feel the energy of the crowd brushing against them, a sensation that is both weightless and deeply real. The museum staff have come to accept the disappearing crowd as one of the building's mysteries. Some leave offerings, small tokens or notes, tucked under benches or along the platforms, as if acknowledging the presence of those who have returned, even fleetingly. Others attempt to record the phenomenon with cameras or audio equipment, often capturing nothing but static or vague blurs. The crowd eludes modern technology, just as it seems to elude the present. Local legend adds another layer of intrigue. Older residents speak of travelers lost to history, of farewells cut short by illness or war, and of the countless passengers who never reached their destinations. Perhaps these unresolved stories anchor the crowd to the hall, replaying a daily routine that can never be completed. Some theorists suggest that the figures are not mere echoes, but conscious manifestations, endlessly moving toward trains that no longer exist, caught between the living world and memory. Witnesses consistently emphasize the suddenness of the disappearance. One moment, the hall is alive with movement. The next, it is silent and empty. The memory of the crowd, however, lingers long after the vision fades. Many who have seen it report a profound sense of having glimpsed another era, as if they briefly traveled back in time and observed a scene that had been frozen for decades. Whether the disappearing crowd is a haunting, a trick of perception, or a residual imprint of history, it remains one of the most compelling legends of the Cincinnati Museum Center. It is a phenomenon that bridges past and present, inviting those who witness it to consider the lives, hopes, and journeys of those who walked these floors before us. For the briefest moments, the hall is alive again with motion and purpose, only to return to stillness, leaving visitors with the chilling reminder that history is never truly gone. The disappearing crowd endures as a silent, spectral ballet of travelers, a fleeting glimpse of movement from another time, a haunting tableau that disappears as quickly as it arrives, and a mystery that continues to intrigue all who enter the Grand Hall at night. The old control tower at the Cincinnati Museum Center stands as a sentinel over the surrounding grounds, its once critical windows now dark and abandoned during the day. By night, however, the tower seems anything but inactive. Staff and visitors alike have reported strange lights flickering within its upper rooms, even though every inspection confirms the building is disconnected from electricity and no equipment remains functional. The phenomenon often begins subtly. A faint glow appears behind the dusty panes of the tower's windows, pulsing gently as if someone is moving inside. Occasionally, shapes can be glimpsed shifting in the light, elongated shadows that stretch across the walls and ceilings. But when approached, the tower is empty. No footsteps echo in the stairwells, no doors creak open, and the stairwell itself is cold and silent, untouched by human presence. Security guards are among the most frequent witnesses. One night, a guard making a routine round spotted a soft, amber glow coming from the tower. Curious, he ascended the narrow staircase to investigate. At the top, the room was barren. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air, untouched by any breeze, and the old control panels were still as they had been for decades. Yet the light continued to flicker behind the windows, casting brief, eerie patterns onto the walls. The guard described a feeling of being watched, a subtle pressure at the back of his neck, as though unseen eyes were tracking his every movement. Others report seeing shadows moving independently of the flickering lights. Sometimes, these shadows appear humanoid, a tall figure pacing back and forth, a smaller shape crouched near the floor. Yet none of them are ever clearly defined. Observers often describe them as blurred, half-formed silhouettes, always just out of focus. The movements seem purposeful, almost like someone operating old equipment, adjusting dials or levers long since abandoned. Attempts to capture the phenomenon on cameras or surveillance equipment yield strange results. Security footage occasionally records faint, wavering streaks of light, but no source can be determined. Photographs taken through the tower's windows show only dark interiors, with shadows that vanish when one looks directly at them. Audio recordings sometimes catch soft, metallic clicks, like the adjustment of levers or buttons, though no human presence is ever found. The lights in the tower appear to follow a pattern of timing, often flickering during the late hours between midnight and 3 a.m. Some staff have speculated that the phenomenon is tied to the tower's operational history. Decades ago, it was the nerve center for coordinating trains and managing communications. The idea that the building itself retains some memory of those who worked tirelessly within its walls is a common theory among paranormal enthusiasts. Perhaps the lights are a spectral echo of the tower's former purpose, the energy of long-departed operators manifesting in flickering illumination. Local legends deepen the intrigue. Stories tell of an operator who worked late into the night during the early days of the museum center. Someone who was said to be meticulous and never left until every detail was checked. Some say he met a tragic end in the tower, succumbing to a heart attack during a particularly stressful evening. Witnesses claim that the lights correspond with moments when he would have been working, as if the spirit remains tied to the space, ensuring that no duty is left undone. The tower's unusual behavior has been reported by multiple generations of staff. New employees often hear the stories and approach with skepticism, only to experience the flickering lights firsthand. Many describe a chilling sensation, a mixture of awe and dread, as the glow pulses and shadows move without explanation. The atmosphere inside the tower is described as heavy, charged with a sense of lingering anticipation, as though some unseen entity is still trying to complete a task left unfinished decades ago. Visitors occasionally glimpse the tower from the ground as well. From afar, the windows glow faintly, casting moving shadows that seem impossible given the tower's unlit and abandoned state. Some have reported that the lights intensify when the observer's attention is focused, as if the tower itself is aware of being watched. Others speak of a faint humming, just audible over the wind, that resonates from the structure, lending a haunting accompaniment to the visual phenomena. Attempts to rationalize the lights often fall short. Electrical faults are impossible. The tower has been disconnected from power for years. Modern equipment cannot account for the shadows, nor for the precise timing of the illumination. Even skeptics admit a shiver runs down the spine when standing beneath the tower late at night, staring up as flickering light dances behind dusty panes. The air seems to thicken, the silence pressing in, while the shadows shift, indifferent to human presence. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to the tower, eager to document the lights and shadows. They report erratic temperature changes, spikes in electromagnetic readings, and a pervasive sense of being observed. Some claim the experience is overwhelming, leaving them breathless or disoriented. Yet, despite their equipment and expertise, no definitive explanation has ever emerged. The lights in the tower continue to intrigue and terrify. They are a spectral remnant of a bygone era, a glimpse into a past where human presence filled every corner with purpose and energy. Observers, whether staff, visitors, or investigators, describe a sense of witnessing history itself come alive. A fleeting reminder that some places retain the essence of those who once walked within them. The flickering continues, night after night. Indifferent to human curiosity, a haunting testament to the mystery that persists in the Cincinnati Museum Center. For those who wander the grounds after hours, the tower remains an enigmatic sentinel, glowing faintly against the darkness. Its lights flicker and shadows move, reminding all who look up that some histories cannot be buried, some duties cannot be abandoned, and some spirits refuse to leave, tethered to the spaces they once knew best. Late at night, when the Cincinnati Museum Center has long emptied of visitors, a quiet tension seems to settle over the halls. Custodians making their rounds speak in hushed tones about the strange phenomena that occur when the lights are dimmed and the echo of empty corridors stretches endlessly. Among the most unsettling of these experiences is the knock at the door phenomenon that has left staff and security guards alike shaken and uneasy for decades. It often begins subtly, a faint tapping, barely audible over the hum of the building's ventilation system, is first dismissed as the natural creaks and groans of an old structure settling into the night. But then the knocks grow sharper, more insistent, echoing off the walls with a deliberate rhythm. Staff describe it as too purposeful to be random, a sequence that seems to demand attention. The sound comes from office doors, storage rooms, or even utility closets, places where no one is supposed to be after hours. Many employees first encountered the phenomenon during late-night cleaning shifts. One custodian recounted a night when he was organizing old archives. The lights had dimmed to a soft glow, and the building was nearly silent. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door to his left, a crisp, deliberate tap that made him freeze. Assuming it was a colleague, he called out, only to receive no answer. Hesitantly, he approached the door, heart pounding, and opened it to find an empty room. The knocking resumed immediately, now louder and faster, as though impatient at being ignored. Terrified, he retreated down the corridor, and the sound eventually faded into the stillness. Security guards have shared similar experiences. During overnight patrols, some report hearing knocks coming from doors on floors that should be deserted. The sound is often accompanied by a cold draft, a subtle shift in temperature that seems to follow the knock itself. When guards attempt to investigate, doors are found firmly closed, and no one is inside. On occasion, the knocks seem to move, jumping from one office to another, echoing through hallways that are completely empty. The persistence of the phenomenon is unnerving, and some guards choose to leave their rounds early rather than confront it directly. The nature of the knocking varies. Some describe it as a single, repeated tap, calm but insistent. Others report a rapid succession, almost urgent, as if the spirit behind it is desperate to communicate. A few staff members have described hearing pauses in the rhythm, almost like a signal, followed by renewed tapping, as though the entity is trying to establish a pattern or relay a message that humans cannot comprehend. Attempts to record the phenomenon with audio equipment have captured the knocking clearly. Yet playback often adds an eerie layer. The sound seems closer, almost surrounding the listener, and faint whispers can sometimes be heard beneath the taps. Researchers and paranormal enthusiasts suggest that the knocking is tied to the building's history. The Cincinnati Museum Center occupies the historic Union Terminal, a structure that has witnessed decades of human activity, from bustling travelers to workers laboring through long nights. Some theorize that the knocks are the echoes of someone who once had a purpose. They're a late-night employee, a security guard, or perhaps an operator who met an untimely end. Their presence may be imprinted on the building, surfacing in the form of persistent knocks that insist on being acknowledged. The phenomenon is not limited to one specific area of the building. Staff report knocks on offices high above the main concourse, in maintenance wings, and even near the old administrative offices that have been abandoned for years. The building's complex design, with its thick walls and hidden corridors, seems to amplify the effect, creating an acoustic resonance that makes the knocks sound closer and more immediate than they might actually be. Many who have experienced the knock at the door describe a powerful emotional response. Fear is common, but so is a sense of unease that lingers long after the sound has stopped. Some report a feeling of being watched, as if the entity behind the knocking is aware of their presence and is silently judging their reaction. Others claim to feel a sudden weight on their shoulders or a subtle pressure in the room, reinforcing the idea that the spirit is not merely trying to startle, but to communicate or, perhaps, to warn. In a few cases, the knocking has been so intense that employees have fled the building entirely. One custodian alone, on the upper floors, described hearing knocking echoing from multiple doors at once, each set of taps layered over the other. The sound became overwhelming, the rhythm frantic, until he ran down the stairs and out into the night. Even after leaving the building, he could feel the echo of the knocks in his ears, a haunting reminder of the mystery that resides within the walls. Despite repeated investigations, no physical explanation has ever been confirmed. Electrical systems, structural settling, or airflow disturbances fail to account for the sharp, rhythmic taps that seem so deliberate and controlled. Paranormal teams who have visited the site report strong energy readings near the doors that knock, and the pattern of activity often coincides with late-night hours when the building is otherwise still and silent. The knock at the door remains one of the most chilling and inexplicable hauntings of the Cincinnati Museum Center. It is a phenomenon that defies logic, a reminder that the building is more than bricks and mortar. It's a vessel for memory, energy, and perhaps lingering spirits. Staff and visitors alike are advised to remain cautious during late-night hours, as the sound of a deliberate, insistent knock may be the first warning that history is not done speaking, and that some presences are determined to make themselves known, no matter how much the living wish them to remain silent. For those walking the quiet halls after hours, the echo of the knock is a constant, unnerving presence. The sound reverberates through corridors, across offices, and down empty stairwells, leaving behind an impression that the building itself is alive. aware, and waiting. Each tap on the door is a reminder that in the Cincinnati Museum Center, the past is never truly gone, and some spirits still insist on being heard. The corridors of the Cincinnati Museum Center, particularly those that once formed the heart of Union Terminal, carry more than the weight of history. They carry the echoes of lives that passed through the building during some of its most turbulent years. Among the countless stories of unexplained phenomena, one of the most poignant involves the spectral figure known as the nurse of the war years. Staff and overnight security guards have reported seeing a woman in a crisp, white nurse's uniform gliding through the hallways, her movements brisk but measured, as if tending to patients in the midst of a busy hospital. The nurse is often spotted in areas that were once designated for troop arrivals, makeshift medical stations, or waiting rooms where soldiers would rest before continuing their journeys. Her figure is strikingly clear, the white of her uniform almost luminous in the dim light of the terminal's corridors, and yet she seems untouchable, completely intangible. Encounters with the nurse of the war years are never accidental. Those who have seen her often describe a sense of urgency in her movements, as though she is deeply absorbed in her duties. She tends to invisible patients, bending down to check on them, adjusting their blankets, or speaking softly in tones that are just below the edge of hearing. Although no soldiers are visible, those nearby sometimes feel the presence of other scold drafts that circle the hallway, the faint clatter of medical instruments, and even the sound of hurried footsteps on the polished floors. One guard recounted a particularly unsettling experience during a routine late-night patrol. As he passed through a narrow corridor on the building's lower level, he noticed a woman in a nurse's cap walking quickly toward him. At first, he assumed it was a member of the cleaning staff, but the figure moved swiftly and silently. Without the weight or sound of a normal person, he froze as she passed right through him, the air around him cooling instantly. Turning to follow, he saw her bend over a corner, as though tending to someone invisible. When he looked again, a moment later, she had vanished entirely, leaving the hallway empty and silent, yet somehow heavier, as though the history of the terminal pressed down in her absence. Other staff described similar occurrences in different parts of the building. One archivist, working late into the night in a hallway lined with old wooden doors, reported seeing the nurse moving purposefully from room to room. The sight was brief, but indelibly clear, a figure in a pristine white dress, kept perfectly in place, walking with a sense of purpose. Each time she appeared, the archivist reported a faint, almost antiseptic smell in the air, reminiscent of old hospitals and the sterilized wards of the 1940s. The figure never acknowledged him, yet he could feel the intensity of her focus, as if she were aware of the living but fully absorbed in her unseen patients. Paranormal investigators have studied the phenomenon extensively, using night vision cameras and thermal imaging. They have captured fleeting glimpses of the nurse's form, though the recordings rarely show a complete figure. Motion sensors occasionally trigger in empty hallways where she has been reported, and the temperature in those areas can drop suddenly, suggesting a strong spiritual imprint. Audio recordings sometimes pick up faint murmurs, as though the nurse is speaking softly to her unseen charges. But the words are indistinct, lost in the echo of the terminal's cavernous halls. Historians suggest the nurse may be tied to the building's role during World War II. Union Terminal served as a crucial transit hub for soldiers, many of whom were traveling long distances between training camps, hospitals, and deployment points. Temporary infirmaries were established in various wings of the terminal to care for those wounded or ill during their journeys. Nurses would have worked tirelessly, moving through the corridors to check on each patient, often late into the night. It is believed that the spectral nurse may be reliving her duties endlessly, a spirit preserved in the memory of her unwavering care. Visitors who glimpse the nurse of the war years often report mixed feelings. Fear is common, especially for those unprepared for the sudden appearance of a white figure in the darkened corridors. Yet many also describe a sense of calm, as though the nurse's presence, though ghostly, is protective. She appears dedicated, her attention focused entirely on the invisible patients around her, and her passage is accompanied by an almost tangible aura of compassion. Some employees claim that seeing her is less frightening than it is awe-inspiring, a reminder of the lives touched and the quiet heroism that once filled the terminal. The nurses' appearances are not limited to a single area or time. Some report sightings during routine cleaning, others during security patrols or archival work. She has been seen on staircases, in waiting areas, and even near old ticket counters. Her presence is persistent, consistent, and unmistakably tied to the building's past. Unlike other spirits reported in the museum, she shows no hostility, no malevolence, only purpose. Over the years, the stories of the nurse of the war years have become a part of the lore of the Cincinnati Museum Center. Staff warn newcomers about the white-clad figure, not to scare them, but to prepare them for a sight that is both historic and haunting. Some say that she serves as a guardian of the past, a link between the present and a time when the terminal was filled with the urgent movements of soldiers and caretakers alike. The spectral nurse is a constant reminder that buildings carry memory. Walls, floors, and corridors preserve more than dust and decay. They preserve energy, emotion, and moments frozen in time. For those who work or visit the Cincinnati Museum Center late at night, the nurse of the war years is a testament to dedication, compassion, and the lingering imprint of a life devoted to care, forever replaying her duties for an audience that cannot see or touch her. To encounter her is to step into history itself, to witness a fragment of the past that refuses to fade, and to understand that the human spirit, even after death, may remain tied to the places it served most diligently. The corridors of Union Terminal are silent witnesses to her tireless work, her presence a subtle, comforting, and profoundly eerie reminder that the past is never truly gone. Late at night, when the last echoes of departing trains have faded and the grand halls of the Cincinnati Museum Center lie in quiet darkness, witnesses have reported one of the museum's most haunting phenomena: the silent farewell. In the expansive concourse, beneath the soaring ceilings and glowing clock faces, two figures appear, frozen in a moment that seems to belong to another era. The figures are always seen as a pair, a young man in a military uniform and a woman in a dress that suggests the fashions of the early 20th century. The soldier's uniform is neat and precise, polished buttons gleaming faintly under the dim lights. His posture is rigid with discipline, yet softened by the tenderness he shows the woman beside him. She clings to him for a brief, poignant moment, her arms around his neck, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Their embrace is quiet, intimate, and filled with a sorrow that is almost tangible. Those who have observed the scene describe a feeling of stillness pressing down upon the hall, as though time itself pauses to honor the connection between them. Many who have witnessed the silent farewell are staff members working late into the night, custodians cleaning the floors, security guards patrolling empty corridors, and archivists sorting through the museum's records have all recounted similar stories. They speak of stepping into the concourse and seeing the couple in the distance, frozen yet alive in appearance, illuminated by the faint glow of the ceiling lights. The soldier and his lover seem unaware of anyone else, completely absorbed in their final moments together. One security guard shared a particularly chilling experience. He had been walking through the hall, flashlights sweeping across the polished floors, when he noticed a couple standing near the center of the concourse. At first, he thought they were actors rehearsing some historical reenactment. But as he approached, the couple remained silent, their lips unmoving, their eyes locked on one another. When he drew within a few steps, the figures slowly dissipated, fading into the air, until nothing remained but the faint echo of absence and the faint scent of aged cologne and pressed fabric. Historians and paranormal investigators alike have attempted to uncover the origins of this haunting. Many believe the soldier represents one of the countless young men who passed through Union Terminal during wartime, leaving loved ones behind before being sent to distant battlefields. His lover, eternally waiting, appears at the moment of departure, capturing the instant when farewells were most painful. The museum itself, as a hub of travel and human emotion, may preserve such poignant memories, replaying them for those sensitive enough to notice. Encounters with the silent farewell are often accompanied by subtle phenomena. Witnesses report a sudden drop in temperature, a hush that descends over the hall, and the faintest sound of fabric brushing against fabric, almost like a sigh. Some have felt the pressure of invisible hands brushing past them, or the pull of emotion so intense that it leaves a lingering ache in the chest. Unlike other apparitions, the silent farewell carries no threat, only profound sadness and love frozen in time. Employees who have observed the apparition multiple times notice consistent details. The soldier always stands slightly taller. The woman's dress sways lightly, despite the absence of wind, and their embrace never changes. They never speak, and their eyes remain fixed on each other, as if the world beyond their arms no longer exists. The moment they fade, the hall feels empty in a way that is more than physical. The emotional weight of their departure lingers long after they vanish. Paranormal investigations have yielded intriguing findings. Video cameras occasionally pick up faint outlines, sometimes suggesting motion between frames. But the images are always incomplete, shrouded in blur or darkness. Audio devices sometimes register indistinct murmurs, the softest hints of words exchanged, though no clear conversation can be discerned. Thermometers and electromagnetic sensors sometimes spike near the area of the apparition, indicating a disturbance in energy, though the cause remains a mystery. Some visitors, drawn to the museum's architecture and history, report glimpsing the couple from a distance, often catching the scene in their peripheral vision. They describe turning to look directly, only to see the figures vanish, leaving the concourse silent and still once more. For many, the experience is less frightening than it is hauntingly beautiful, a frozen glimpse of human emotion, preserved through decades, perhaps a testament to love and loss that transcends mortality. The silent farewell has become part of the lore of the Cincinnati Museum Center. Employees tell stories of the embracing couple as both cautionary tales and moments of awe. New staff are warned to keep their eyes open in the concourse after hours, not to frighten them, but to prepare them for the subtle presence of the past replaying itself. The apparition is unique among the museum's hauntings because it is not violent or malicious. It exists to remind the living of the moments that shaped the lives of those who walked these halls before them. Over the years, multiple accounts have solidified the silent farewell as one of the most poignant hauntings in the museum. It is said that those who witness it gain an acute sense of the human stories embedded in the terminal, understanding that the museum is not just a collection of artifacts, but a repository of memory, emotion, and unfinished farewells. The soldier and his lover remain suspended in that eternal embrace, repeating their silent goodbye night after night, unseen by most, but remembered by those who have glimpsed them. They are a quiet reminder that even in the midst of history, amid bustling travelers and the passage of time, some moments are never truly forgotten. The silent farewell continues to appear, a spectral echo of devotion and loss, leaving the hall with a weight that can be felt but never touched, a ghostly testament to the power of love and the ache of parting. Late at night, when the grand halls of the Cincinnati Museum Center are deserted and the echoes of daytime visitors have faded, a strange phenomenon appears that has fascinated staff, historians, and paranormal enthusiasts alike, known as the Eternal Travelers. This haunting involves entire groups of phantom passengers moving through the terminal, as though the bustling activity of the past refuses to leave. Witnesses describe seeing people in vintage attire from the early to mid-20th century, men in bowler hats and overcoats, women in long skirts and cloche hats, walking purposefully through the halls, dragging old-fashioned suitcases or carrying parcels. Their movements are deliberate, precise, and eerily silent, as if their actions are dictated by some unseen schedule they are bound to follow for eternity. Security guards on late-night patrols were among the first to report the phenomenon. One guard recounted how he had been checking the empty concourse when he noticed a cluster of figures gathering near the platform area. At first, he assumed it was a group of night staff taking a break, but as he approached, he realized no one was actually there. The figures moved naturally, pacing toward imaginary train cars, chatting in hushed tones that seemed just out of earshot. Their footsteps made no sound, Yet the guard described the heavy sensation of movement through the hall, as if the air itself acknowledged the presence of bodies that could not be touched. Witnesses consistently report that the eternal travelers follow a predictable pattern. They appear to be reenacting moments from the terminal's busiest era, circling through the concourse, lining up near ticket counters, moving down hallways, and disappearing just as suddenly as they appeared. Some observers have even noticed that certain individuals always occupy the same positions in the group, suggesting that these are not randoms but faithful echoes of real people from the past, trapped in a perpetual loop of arrivals and departures. The costumes worn by these travelers often provide clues to the period they represent. Men are frequently seen in military uniforms, hinting at the many soldiers who passed through the station during World War II. Women are adorned in long coats with hats secured by delicate pins, sometimes clutching handbags or newspapers. Children, too, have been spotted in tiny coats and caps, holding their parents' hands as they navigate the concourse. Their presence adds a poignant dimension to the haunting, as it reflects the human stories of travel, hope, and separation that once filled the terminal. The auditory experiences accompanying the eternal travelers are just as compelling. Some visitors report faint snippets of conversation, murmured farewells, the rustle of luggage, the subtle click of polished shoes on the marble floors. Occasionally, the sound of distant train whistles or the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks can be heard. Though no train has passed through the terminal in decades, investigators have also picked up fleeting whispers in old dialects and languages, including German and Italian, which correspond with the immigrant populations that historically traveled through the station. One custodian shared a particularly unnerving encounter. While sweeping the floors late one evening, she noticed a small boy tugging at a suitcase, as if trying to catch up with his family. When she stepped closer, the child glanced up briefly, his eyes wide and sorrowful, and then dissolved into the air, leaving the suitcase behind. When she examined the object, it was light as air, containing nothing but the faint scent of leather and old cloth. She recalled a similar experience near the ticket counters, where a man in a uniform nodded politely before vanishing as she attempted to interact with him. Paranormal investigators have studied the eternal travelers extensively. Thermal cameras and motion sensors frequently register anomalies, capturing shapes that seem solid yet fail to interact with the environment. Some video footage shows translucent figures drifting across hallways, their edges wavering as if the world itself struggles to maintain the illusion of substance. Audio devices occasionally record faint footsteps and murmured voices, which vanish when played back at normal speed, leaving only the impression of presence. Electromagnetic readings spike in certain areas of the concourse, particularly near the platforms and ticket booths, suggesting that these spaces are saturated with residual energy from past human activity. The phenomenon of the eternal travelers is widely regarded as one of the most emotionally compelling hauntings in the museum. Unlike malevolent spirits, these apparitions do not cause harm. Instead, they evoke a profound sense of nostalgia and melancholy, as if the terminal itself is preserving the memories of those who once passed through its halls. Visitors who witness the phenomenon often report feeling as though they have glimpsed a portal into another era, witnessing the lives and journeys of people long gone yet somehow still present. Some theorists suggest that the haunting is tied to the emotional weight carried by the terminal during its operational years. Soldiers departing for war, immigrants leaving for new lives, and families saying tearful goodbyes created a concentrated mass of human emotion that became embedded in the building's structure. This emotional imprint, combined with the terminal's intricate architecture and historical significance, may allow the energy to replay itself indefinitely, producing the appearances of the eternal travelers. Over the decades, the haunting has gained a reputation among staff and visitors alike. Employees speak of late-night patrols with a mix of awe and respect, careful not to disturb the phantoms as they follow their ceaseless routine. Tourists occasionally glimpse these ghostly groups during evening tours or after-hours events, often leaving the museum with a sense of wonder mixed with unease. The Eternal Travelers remain a vivid reminder that the Cincinnati Museum Center is more than a repository of history and artifacts. It is a living record of human experience, a place where time and memory intersect in ways that continue to mystify and intrigue. Their silent journeys through the concourse serve as both a haunting and a tribute to spectral acknowledgement of lives spent in transit, of connections formed and lost, and of the inexorable passage of time. Those who witness them, whether staff, historians, or chance visitors, are forever marked by the profound and unsettling beauty of the eternal travelers who move ceaselessly, boarding trains that no longer exist, in a cycle that has no end. And so, we close the book on the 25 most haunting stories of the Cincinnati Museum Center. Behind its walls, history still lingers, not only in artifacts and archives, but in the restless echoes of lives lived, journeys ended, and stories unfinished. Each whisper, each shadow, each phantom traveler reminds us that places hold memories far deeper than we see. If you ever find yourself wandering its grand halls, take a moment to listen, really listen. You may hear footsteps on empty marble, or the faint song of someone who never left. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this long, chilling journey. If you enjoyed tonight's tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more haunted histories and ghostly encounters. Until next time, keep your lights low, your heart steady, and remember, the past is never truly gone. Good night.